Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, May 4th, 2020. This is a municipal caucus. We had a scheduled 4 p.m. start.
John, I don't know if we went live right when you were.
Yeah, we're live. We're live, Brian. In effort to adhere to the social distancing protocols and best practices imposed by city and state authorities, the city of Jersey City has canceled all public meetings and closed non-essential services as of March 16th, 2020 until further notice. As a result, this council caucus will be held virtually as a video conference and will be able to go through everything virtually. We do have some guests as well. So this meeting was scheduled to start at 4 p.m. The clock on my computer when we started was exactly 4 p.m. May I have a roll call for the commencement of this caucus? Councilperson Ridley.
Here.
Councilperson Prinzeri.
Here.
Councilperson Baggiano.
Here.
And newly appointed Councilperson Saleh.
Present.
Councilperson Solomon.
Here.
Councilperson Robinson.
Here.
Councilperson Lavaro.
Here.
Councilperson Rivera.
Here.
And Council President Waterman.
Here.
We have all 9 members in attendance at 4 p.m. In addition, at the time of its preparation, the agenda of this meeting was similarly disseminated on Friday, May 1st, 2020 at 2:30 to the mayor, council, business administrator, and the Jersey City Reporter and Jersey Journal, and posted on the World Wide Web, so I can certify as to our total compliance with the Sunshine Law. I am now going to turn the meeting over to our council president, Joyce Waterman.
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's staying safe. Sean, we're just going to follow the agenda accordingly. I know we have some speakers, so we'll hear the speakers at the end. Okay?
Okay.
We have 2 speakers, and we'll hear them at the end.
Very good. So we're going to move on to our first reading ordinance. Unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me, but I believe it's a first reading ordinance discussing the delivery fees. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Okay, let's put that up on the screen. There we go. So I apologize. I didn't have it in front of me.
We are, I asked for a copy to be emailed to me. It should be getting here closely. Actually, I think we'll be emailing it directly to you, Sean.
Okay. I apologize for that. Okay. But it is an ordinance. If you want to get started until we...
Yeah, let's get started until we get it.
So it's an ordinance regarding the delivery fee. So we can skip that and go back to it once I do receive it. So we can discuss it further. So we'll move on to our, there's only one first reading.
If you want, I can read the text, the main body text if you want me to.
Yeah, can you read the title? Because I don't have the title.
So the title of this ordinance is an ordinance amending Chapter 175, food handling establishments to include restrictions on fees charged to restaurants and food delivery establishments by third-party internet-based food delivery services or applications during declared states of emergency. So the main intent of this ordinance is to prohibit any app-based food delivery platform to charge restaurants or food establishments a commissioned fee for online delivery or pickup orders that is more than 10% of the purchase price of such online order during a declared state of emergency. I believe Councilman Solomon has spoken to almost everyone on the council about this, and almost all of you are co-sponsors. We're still working out how to formally include everyone as a co-sponsor on the fact sheet. Unfortunately, the system doesn't allow more than one co-sponsor, but we can probably put it in the purpose section there.
Okay.
Right, Sean, that was just emailed to you, and I understand it was just approved on the electronic agenda as well. So
yeah,
probably just floating out there in space as we speak.
Yeah.
Brian just read everything into the record, which is the title into the record, which is perfect. And I do have it. I just printed out a copy for myself. Council members, we'll be sending you a copy as well, and if it's not uploaded already on the site.
Okay,
And if everyone and members of the public, if they can refresh their page, their agenda page, they'll be able to see. Oh, still not there yet. Yep. Okay.
It may take a couple of minutes.
Yep.
I also want to note that the mayor does intend to do an executive order to make sure this goes into effect as soon as possible. But we're going to wait until after the council introduces and make sure that the council agrees on the form of it. And also, of course, that the council gets the credit for doing this. So he'll probably do an executive order on Thursday, pending legal review and final council approval here.
okay.
Because
Very
once
good.
again, as an ordinance, obviously, this will take at least till a second reading to go into effect.
Okay,
Are we?
All right, Sean.
I'm sorry. I just have a question. So, are we making this effective after after the second reading? Are we looking to waive the 20 days? And if so, we're going to have that on the next agenda as well.
Yes, I think if the council does want to have it take effect immediately, we would prepare that resolution for the next meeting that would waive that 20 days.
Excellent.
okay.
Thank you so much, Peter. All right.
Clerk, if I may for a second, I apologize on video today.
Absolutely. Okay.
I think most of the council had seen it and was either comfortable with it or had a few potential changes that they might suggest, but I maybe just wanted to open it up and see if anyone had any potential changes that they wanted to propose or discuss, or any questions before we, move on to the next agenda item.
I just like to ask a question. I'm not against it, but 10%. I know one fellow that delivered to somebody, and it took him an hour and a half to get into the store to get the shopping. These are individuals that are doing this. They're third-party individuals. Is it 10% too low for certain people, you think?
I think it's a good question, Councilman. So the 10% came from a number of other municipalities have been pursuing this, and that's the number that they have. Many of them have done. One has gone lower at 5, and then I think another higher at 15. But why don't we're going to talk to some restaurants and some folks, and we can get you a little bit more information on why 10% may make sense versus 15 or 5.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, I just want to add to that. That's a good point, Rich, with respect to that. But I think it's something that we need to also speak with the SIDs, that have these restaurants in their district as well. I know that the Historic Downtown SID has a lot of these restaurants, and there's a lot of questions and concerns. I mean, I really like the ordinance. I think, like I discussed offline with Councilman Solomon, I think that we should just speak a little bit. Maybe there's got to be some amendments to it, but overall the ordinance is good.
Who is going to enforce this? That's another question. Like, we have the Airbnb, nobody's enforcing it. We have a few the noise ordinance not enforced. Who's going to enforce this?
I think as a matter of practicality, I think it's going to come down to if restaurants themselves feel that they have been overcharged, they would report to Division of Commerce, or they would report to even the police to note that the overcharge took place.
All right. Okay, listen, I just got a text from somebody. It says, I signed into City Hall app. I already had a Skype. Hold on. Jesus, hold on. I already had a Skype, but they can't get onto this council caucus meeting. Is there a problem with it?
There shouldn't be. We have 53 attendees signed on. There shouldn't be any issues. As long as they go to our website, and I think it's right actually on the homepage how to just to click the link.
All right, it's on the homepage.
Pretty sure it is. Brian, can you confirm that?
Yeah. It's on the, if you go to jcnj.org/virtual VCM, It'll be there.
VC?
VCM, Virtual Council Meeting. But also, if you click through on the homepage and you go to the Public Meetings tab on the right side, you'll be able to click through to it.
All right, I'm texting them back, jcnj.org. Okay,
/VCM, yep.
okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Got it.
I have
Thanks,
one more question on 3.1 for the law department for Peter. A question a constituent had was, the law is currently written that it would end whenever the public state of emergency ends. Is there a way to, instead of ending the law at that point, like trigger the ordinance coming back up for a vote? The idea being, we may be, even once the public health emergency ends, we may be living in a world where people are just much more reliant on takeout and pickup orders. And so this type of ordinance we might want to keep in place. And so is there a way for us to like trigger a vote again when the state of emergency ends?
So if I could just understand your question correctly, so that rather than have it be effective in all states of emergency, that there could be a process that would essentially, trigger the vote to whether it could essentially be put back into place during that state of emergency, correct?
Well, no, the vote would happen is when the state of emergency ends, the council would vote as to whether they do want it to sunset or they would actually want it to keep it even though the state of emergency is no longer declared.
I'll look into that. I'll see if there's I'll see if there's some language that we can put in there for that. I think probably the simple answer would be that there could be council action to reintroduce. But if there's a way to do that automatically, we'll see what we can do.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
And Councilman Bogiano, to answer your question about the 10%,
Right.
I know that if someone goes on my website, thelightrailcafe.com, and they click on delivery, Uber Eats will pick it up for 10%. The 30% is triggered by someone ordering directly off of the Uber Eats app, and they usually charge that fee, and it's almost a advertisement fee, not a delivery fee. The extra 20%. But if you go on my personal page and you click delivery from my page, they only charge 10%.
All right, okay.
So they are already charging that, but you have to go on the individual website instead of going through, the Uber Eats and look at all of the restaurants that's available at the time. But they will charge 10% if they don't have to if you don't click on it from their website.
All right, okay.
Any more questions?
Has there been any significant pushback from the third-party apps or the restaurateurs regarding the municipalities that have implemented this this sort of provision? Or
That's a good question, Councilman. I think it's new enough that it's only recently passed within the last couple of weeks. So I think the third-party apps have said that they don't support these types of initiatives, but they haven't been in place long enough yet, I think, for us to really gauge the full impacts from both the restaurants and the apps.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, Sean.
Okay, on to our second reading ordinances. Item 4.1, City Ordinance 20-026, an ordinance vacating 17th Street pursuant to Jersey Avenue Park redevelopment plan. I believe that there were going to be some amendments to this, Brian?
Councilman Solomon, I don't know if you had any, I can't remember exactly what we discussed here.
Yes, so just for the council, this was the one that was introduced in March, and then the combination of paternity leave and COVID, we didn't get a chance to meet with JCRA planning and developer and myself until a few weeks ago. We did, and we have some small amendments to it, 4.1, that just further strengthen the public sort of interest. So this is a portion of 17th Street that the city would vacate. It doesn't connect anywhere because the park is going to be there, so the street is sort of dead ending, and this would ensure that it's a pedestrian plaza, which would have to be built out and operated by the developer there, but would always be accessible to the public for 24/7 as an access point between Monmouth and the park. There were some small changes that had been made, and I believe Corporation Counsel reviewed them and determined them to be non-substantive, but Peter, you could confirm on that or not. And then my understanding is now and this is a question for Peter, the clerk, and the BA, but my understanding is we have to sort of motion to make these amendments now. And so I don't know if I need to do that now or at the council meeting on Wednesday.
You would definitely make that motion at the meeting. We don't take any action during the caucus.
Got it. So I can then email the proposed change document that we have to everybody, so you all can see it. And then I don't know if Peter, if you guys have determined yet if this is substantive or not.
Councilman, this is Nick. I reviewed the changes that Matt had sent over to me, and they are non-substantive. They are procedural in nature. So assuming the council wants to make those amendments on Wednesday, it would not trigger a new second reading.
And clerk, how would you like me to make the amendments on Wednesday?
If you can send them to me, just like you said you were going to send them to the entire council, you send them to me, and then I will incorporate them into the ordinance, and I'll try to do it maybe in italics, Brian, if that helps. So then we know that which the amendments are, so they're identifiable to the members of the public as well as the members of the council.
All right, and I should just make a motion to update the ordinance.
You don't have to do that. What you're going to do, you're going to send that, but then when we come for the meeting, the council meeting itself, that's when you're going to make the motion, and then the motion would have to be read. Motion to amend City Ordinance 20-026, and here are the amendments, and then we would read the amendments into the record.
Got it, but I would let you read the amendments into the record.
Sure, I mean, yeah, that's not a problem.
Great, okay, perfect. So I will send those over and go from there.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? Okay, Sean.
Okay, next item is item 4.2, City Ordinance 20-032, an ordinance providing for special assessment for the cost of certain public infrastructure improvements within and nearby Cole Street Park in the city of Jersey City and the county of Hudson, state of New Jersey, and authorizing the execution of certain agreements in connection therewith.
All right. Sean, or Brian, what is this going to cost the taxpayers of Jersey City?
Is there anyone from the developer, representing the developer here, that could speak to exactly the amount that this is going to end up being? I'm not sure the numbers. We can maybe get that for you after the caucus as a follow-up before the council meeting.
Well, Brian, Joe Bauman spoke on this 2 meetings ago and also sent a memo to the council. The cost of this bond is entirely being borne by the developer. It's not being borne by the taxpayer.
Right.
You sure?
Yes, and if you want to check, I'll double check the memo. You can check the memo that Joe Bauman sent out to you, and he confirmed that on the record, 3 weeks ago when he appeared. The special assessment is for the special assessment to the development for these improvements. It's not for the.
Okay, Peter, would you check on that, please, and let me know?
Sure.
Thank you, Peter.
So Nick, when you say it's being borne entirely by the developer, so as I understood, the JCRA is bonding, and that we're securing the bond. Is that accurate?
The details of it, I'm gonna leave to Mr. Bauman and his team. But the important point I know coming out of those conversations was it was not being borne by the taxpayer and being borne on the development. So, but Councilman, I also know you said several questions along, about a half an hour ago. I know the JCRA is putting answers together on those as well.
Okay, so I just want to raise a couple of points, and I council members, I sent a long list of questions, and after taking a closer look at everything in relation to this, and I just sent it over today. So so a couple of issues that I raised was that the cost estimate that's in the document indicates that the cost is estimated at the cost of construction, I guess, for the improvements is 2.1 million, and yet the bond being issued by the JCRA is 2.9 million. So the difference of about 800,000 or so plus is unexplained, and so wanted to get some information about that. The other question I had was that whether this would qualify then for project labor agreement. For those who were here in pre-2017, the council amended the project labor agreement laws, making it such that if a redevelopment area, any sort of bond, whether it be redevelopment area bonds, what we talked about frequently at that time, or any bond was secured against the development, that it could be eligible for a project labor agreement. So if that was the case, I'd like to see that such a PLA would be applied to this development. I don't even know what other stages are left in the development of the project outside of the infrastructure or the park with regard to the residential development and or the mixed use going on there. And then a couple of other things I raised, and I'll just kind of tick off some of the questions, was if we could impose some sort of value engineering to the cost of the project, both for the infrastructure improvements, and then the cost itself, like who came up with the cost estimates? Was that done by the city or by the developer? Obviously, if it's done by the developer, then I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that those are certified and that somebody actually vetted that, and that we're not just taking the developer's word for what those costs are, and that that our agencies, MUA and DPW, are involved in that because it's roads and sewage infrastructure improvements, and that they certify the costs of these improvements. And then going back kind of to the PLA, the questions around how many jobs would be generated, not just necessarily by the infrastructure improvements or the park development, but by the development of the residential as well. And then what other uses can the special assessment be utilized for besides the for the infrastructure improvements? And then another question had to do with cost overruns and who's responsible for that if the cost should overrun. And then the other question was if the land or the development of the project should be sold, and if there should be some profits gained as a result, who would the city be sharing in that in any way, given the investments there? And then my last question, which actually wasn't on the list, and I'll direct this to Brian or anyone else with the administration who's on the call. There was proposals to talk about doing some ordinance requiring infrastructure, that infrastructure improvements be written into an ordinance requiring developers to do that. That was proposed some time ago. I don't recall exactly when. The planning department had brought it to each member of the council in small groups, I believe, and talked about imposing those requirements so that if a developer came to propose development, that we wouldn't have to, that it would become part of the cost of development for them, as opposed to kind of the city negotiating that cost as part of a give back or something to that effect. And in fact, it's not be construed as a give back, but just the cost of doing business for a development. What's the status of that ordinance, and why wouldn't we just wait for that ordinance to be enacted? I thought we were fairly close with that, if not already supposed to be enacted.
I'm not totally sure where we are with that. I can check with planning as well. I also did see your email come through a few minutes ago, and I think Diana Jeffrey from JCRA started to answer some of your questions. But if it's okay with you, I think it would be easiest for us to just, as we send our updates from the caucus via email, that we just include answers there. I don't know if we have all the answers right now.
Okay. I would ask that the administration consider holding this off for one meeting till these are fairly length, and I apologize, I know this is late, but I just didn't get through it in great detail, so, but some of these questions are pretty, I think, significant, particularly the project labor agreement and PICA as well. And if there's an opportunity there to generate local jobs and minority contractors and so forth, I think we should take that opportunity. I will wait for the responses and ask that the administration consider tabling this and then, or deferring, I should say, rather. Tabling is not the right answer. Response, but deferring it to the next meeting so that we can kind of dot the i's and cross the t's on this.
Brian, any,
We're
is
gonna
it
try
a
and answer all
time
these.
constraint?
We'll follow up on this. I'm not sure of the
Okay.
timing, but for now, we're gonna keep it on and we're gonna try to answer all the questions as we can.
Okay. All right. Sean? Any more questions?
If I could just add for the council, Joe Bauman sent a memo answering my questions on Thursday. I haven't had a chance to review it yet, though. So I will read it hopefully tonight, and if something does arise from those, I will make sure everybody knows.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Sean, continue. Sean?
I'm sorry, I had myself muted. Okay, so you didn't even hear when I first started talking. Good, good. So item 4.3, City Ordinance 20-033, an ordinance of the City of Jersey City amending Chapter 260, rent control. Number 1, imposing a rent freeze on all units subject to rent control as of March 15th, 2020 until August 20th, 2020, and prohibiting any collection of a penalty for late payment of rent as a result of the current public health emergency declared by the Governor of New Jersey.
Sean,
Council members, this is very similar to the ordinance
Right.
first proposed by Councilman Solomon. The administration is okay with the council defeating or tabling this ordinance
Yes.
before the public hearing, just so we have the one ordinance and it keeps everything streamlined. For the most part, you know, there are items. For the most part, the intent of both ordinances gets the point across at this point. So,
Okay,
defer
you're
to you.
pulling this ordinance, Brian?
Well, we can't pull it now because it's a second reading, but
All right.
we'll leave it up to the council if you want to defeat it or table it before public hearing.
All right,
We
this is,
supposed
it's also, I'm sorry.
what we did, we agreed that we would defeat this one and accept the other one that we all worked on.
All right, the other one excludes 1 to 4 family homes.
Correct.
Correct, okay, all right.
So we can make a motion to defeat the ordinance, just like we did, I think, a couple of meetings ago on another ordinance that we had a similar ordinance on.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Sean.
You're welcome. All right, next, any other questions on this one?
No, Sean, enough of me.
Okay, so the next one is going to be item 4.4, City Ordinance 20-034, an ordinance authorizing the execution of a First Amendment to a right-of-way use agreement between the City of Jersey City and Cross River Fiber LLC to permit the installation of high-capacity fiber optic cable and equipment for mobile telecommunications on existing utility poles and to install new utility poles within certain public rights-of-way for the purpose of providing telecommunication services.
All right, Sean, this week on Facebook, somebody was out of state, they put down that they had a tester for radiation, and they said that the amount of radiation coming from poles was unbelievable. Now, how are we going to secure the people, or how are we going to know about radiation and if this is true? I mean, this, until we get a guarantee there's no radiation and there's no problems, I don't think this should go through.
Council members, we have a representative from Cross River Fiber and AT&T in the meeting with us that can answer additional questions. We have provided information about the safety of 5G infrastructure in the past, including at the last caucus meeting as an update email. But if you have any specific questions about this, happy to have
Yeah,
representatives.
I want to know about radiation. It was on Facebook. There was a big thing on Facebook about it and warning the people of the danger of the radiation from these poles. And they used
Brian, may I address it? I'm sorry. This is
Yeah.
Rob Sakota.
Robert, is that you?
Yes, it is.
Yep. Do you want
So,
to introduce
Councilman,
yourself for the public record and just go from there?
sure. My name is Rob Sakota. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for Cross River Fiber. We're the utility firm registered with the Public Utility Commission in the state of New Jersey, who would be installing the utility poles that are covered by the proposed ordinance. With respect to your question, Councilman, we provided some information already to Jersey City administration regarding the FCC regulatory environment with respect to small cells, with respect to cellular phones in general. There's been a long history of the FCC regulating and ensuring safety. But even if you're concerned generally about large installations, when you see, say, big towers, the types of equipment we're talking about for these, what we call small cells on utility poles, are much smaller and much safer than even your normal deployments for cellular phones. The radio size, the power on the radios for the deployment we're proposing is about 5 watts. That's probably comparable with the Wi-Fi receivers that most of you or many of you are using for the current telephone call or the current meeting. These are very small, very low powered, and we don't believe there's any concern generally with respect to cellular communications. But even for those who have a heightened sense of concern, these type of deployments are really much smaller and much safer than a normal type of deployment.
All right, well, you're guaranteeing me and the people of Jersey City that there's no radiation coming from these poles.
There's no more emission from this pole, like I said, than there would be from your Wi-Fi router.
And wait, hold on, what was that?
These new poles.
And you're talking about new poles, and if I believe on Trenton Street, they were around and they marked some people's sidewalks to put these poles in without authorizing or asking the people if they wanted them on their sidewalks. So I just want to warn you, don't go around just going in front of people's houses and putting these poles.
Absolutely not, Councilman. The process by which we would put in the poles would be to, even after this agreement would be approved, would be to work with the administration, with the engineering department, so that the administration has already asked us, and we've agreed to, include provisions in so that each site will be subject to the administration's permitting. And then after the site is permitted and we're permitted to go put in the pole, I think in response to concerns expressed by the council, we've agreed to ensure that notices go out to local residents with respect to the installations. We've got a copy of a notice that PSE&G uses, and we would use a similar notice to make sure everyone is aware of what's going on.
All right, because I'm just warning you that if I get complaints from people, I want to make sure their rights are protected. And as I said, there were complaints about 4 or 5 months ago. They started marking the streets for these things, and a lot of people got upset. So I'm just telling you, all right? And that goes throughout the entire city, and the other council people should be aware of this.
Understood.
All right.
Robert, Councilman Jermaine Robinson here. Are there any lawsuits pending right now against you guys for this 5G, for this, I guess, cell network?
No, Councilman, there are no lawsuits pending against us with respect to 5G. I'm not aware of any lawsuits, frankly, in the state of New Jersey with respect pending against any of the providers, but I certainly know for a fact there are no lawsuits against us with respect to the deployment.
Thanks.
Okay. I have a question for the law department. We spoke previously about sending the notice, which I know you've just addressed. Can we make sure that that notice includes the location where it's going in, but also the findings of the health studies that have been done so that residents have some of that information and know the risk or the lack of risk involved with these polls that are going in when we send them that notice? And for, I think Nick, is Nick on? We discussed adding a provision similar to what we're asking them to do to send a notice to residents when polls are installed, adding that across the board, not just for this time, but for other installations that may happen in the future. So I just want to make sure that we're working towards doing that as well.
And from what I'm hearing, Mr. Sakata's testimony today, he's willing to agree to that.
Okay.
So it sounds like would not be a problem to insert that amendment into the ordinance for the second reading. For the notice requirements, both in terms of where the polls are going to go in and also the health information, so the public is aware of the health studies that are done about the safety of 5G.
Awesome.
Okay.
Rob, one more question. Why can't we use existing poles? Why do we have to be putting in more poles onto our sidewalks and streets?
The deployment, we're a contractor on behalf of AT&T, and some portion of the deployment will be on existing poles. The problem with utilizing only existing poles is, one, in many instances, the existing poles are already burdened with amount of electrical equipment from PSE&G that make the utilization of the pole from a small cell perspective impossible, and PSE&G won't allow mobile providers to use that because of the danger of installing this equipment given the existing power equipment on it. In other instances, you want to make sure when you do a deployment that you're enhancing and improving the service to customers. And if, for example, you have two poles, which again might already be utilized with certain other equipment and can't be burdened with additional equipment, that's why you would use a new pole, basically to try to make sure that you're reaching areas that need the cellular coverage.
Yeah. Now, these wires couldn't go under the ground, Rob?
What we're talking about here are the radios themselves, which will have to obviously be elevated to be able to get a signal. Now, they will also be connected with fiber optic cabling. The areas where they're in, we're doing fiber optic cabling to connect all of the poles. In areas where fiber optic cabling is underground, then we're going to utilize underground Verizon conduit where possible. Where the poles exist already, that is Verizon poles exist already in the neighborhood, that we would utilize those poles to attach the fiber optic cable.
All right.
Nick, Jermaine, what's the radius on the sending out the paperwork to the neighbors or the health study?
Councilman, you're one step ahead of me. I was just about to ask the Mr. Sakata as well as the council. Are you looking for 100 feet or 200 feet, or there's a particular radius that everyone's comfortable with for purposes of inserting that provision into the ordinance?
Rob, do you know, I guess you've done this before, like the radius, is it 100 feet, 200 feet that you usually send the notices out?
I think typically we would probably use the 100 feet, but essentially we're happy to do whatever other utility companies do. And like I said, I think we took the form from a prior notification provided by PSE&G, and we're happy to utilize whatever distribution process that they utilized.
All right. Rob, how many poles do you expect to put throughout the city?
The current ordinance is a request for 72 poles.
72.
It's possible that, we do some further work and we'd come back at some later date with some addition, but for the time being, we're just asking for 72 poles.
All right, because Brian had sent us some information about a month ago, but it was like, you couldn't even read it. It was so small and so illogical. So I'd like to know where they're going into the area of Ward C. So would you please let me know?
We can do that. I had a map, Brian, that I think I forwarded you where it has a, tried to put on one piece of paper the proposed locations for all of those sites. We can certainly provide more detailed maps for you if you'd like.
It was so small and the printing was so small, you need a super duper mic, something to read it.
Sure. We can get you more extensive
All right.
maps as well.
All right.
I also wanted to ask a question regarding who's going to be maintaining the utility poles if they go down, if they need maintenance, if a cell is not working properly, a hurricane comes through and knocks down a pole. Who is going to be maintaining these poles, and for how long?
We, as the registered utility company, we were responsible for maintaining the poles the same way we're responsible for maintaining our telecommunication infrastructure in all of the cities we operate in the state of New Jersey. If a pole went down and it had maybe only our fiber optic cable on it, but the pole belonged to Verizon, then Verizon would be responsible for fixing the pole, and we would follow up with responsibility to reattach our fiber to that pole.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
So,
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
go ahead. I was going to say, Nick, the provision you're looking to add into the ordinance, as far as notifying the property owners, would that require the ordinance not to be up for second reading at this meeting and to be redirected to the next meeting possibly, or to get those notices out?
No, the notice requirement would not be a substantive change to the ordinance. So it would be an amendment that could be made on the floor of the council meeting on Wednesday. And if approved, it would not trigger a second reading.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask, we had talked about the design challenges, particularly in the historic districts. Can either the BA or the law or the outside attorney summarize sort of where we're at with that?
Yeah, so the vendor, Robert, has agreed to allow the city an additional layer of review on the polls. This was requested through the first iterations of this agreement that went out to other vendors. But for whatever reason, there was not this additional layer of review from the council. So we've agreed that they will send us and the council members for each respective district a sample draft design of what the polls will look like before we make any approvals. And as I noted in my update email to the council members of the last caucus, I've instructed the city engineer to not approve any pole installations until the council person of that ward has approved the design and that we're all squared away on this.
Okay, great.
You know, we are, just so you understand, we did speak to Brian, and we are agree that we should be installing poles that are consistent with the existing landscape for the neighborhood in which they're going. And obviously that requires some additional detail and planning with respect to historic districts and other places where you might have specialty type poles.
Brian? So the council has approved previously 2 other vendors with similar installations. So will the notification requirements be applicable to them as well? And have they completed their installations at this point? Do we know?
Yeah, so we talked about this at the last caucus. There are some other installations currently in progress right now from other vendors, and we're just going back their records to make sure that they all went through the appropriate approval process. I don't want to answer incorrectly at this point as to where we are with those.
So perhaps to the question direct to Nick is that the changes here that will require the notifications within 100 feet, if they still have continuing installations, will those notification requirements be applicable to them as well, or is that even possible to do at this point?
Well, what we're discussing for this ordinance is related to this particular vendor. All those other ordinances have already been approved. We can certainly go back to those vendors and make the request that they carry out the 100 feet notice, but it's not contained in the already passed ordinances as it would be for this one, which is being passed in the future on Wednesday, presumably, or the next meeting, whenever.
Yeah, if we could go back to them and let them know that that's a requirement that the Jersey City would want to see going forward, or their pre-existing, any continuing installations, as well as any future ones that they may look for, that they may come to us for approvals for. That being said, at the last council meeting as well, when this was discussed, and I forget the name of the town already, there was referenced another town that had imposed certain requirements or restrictions or limitations on these sort of installations. Was there any research done into that, and what was the findings of that into that municipality?
Councilman, that was Little Silver, and I did send that over to the law department, and we discussed it. I can let Nick speak about that, but I just wanted to let you know we did send it.
Sure. The two, Councilwoman Ridley and I, and one of the other lawyers in the department discussed it. The two things to keep in mind about Little Silver is it's a very small municipality compared to Jersey City, and also it has a very little elevation change. So they probably were able to put all of the 5G requirements in one particular location, as opposed to Jersey City, where you're not going to be able to have one particular location cover all the 5G requirements of the town. In addition, Little Silver's, one of the things the ordinance did was lay out the administrative process, which it's the administrative process that we already have, which is requirement of going through engineering, going through the permitting, having each site reviewed, and the historic preservation piece also reviewed. So it codified an administrative process, but also in the limitations of the location is probably specific to that particular town where they were able to do that. It's just a unique situation to a very small municipality, both of square footage as also elevation.
So the limitation that Little Silver put in was written restricting the installations to a specific location as opposed to throughout the town, or
correct.
That was the only.
I think the reason they were able to do that is because of the limited elevation change, and there's the tiny nature of the town itself.
Mm-hmm. But that was the only limitation that they imposed upon them, you're saying?
My recollection of my review of it was the location and also the administrative process, which is consistent with the process we already have.
Okay. Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Sean.
Okay, on to our next item, which is item 4.5, City Ordinance 20-035, an ordinance supplementing Chapter 332, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 9, Parking for the Disabled of the Jersey City Code, designating a reserved parking space at various locations throughout the city.
Questions? Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, the next.
Council President?
Sure.
Before we continue, I just wanted to, as we're getting closer to resolutions, and one of the invited guests is not on, and
okay.
Asking if Bernadette can take a look at that and see if she can do something to get that person on board.
Councilman, she is unable to join with video. She is on with audio.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, item 4.6, City Ordinance 20-036, an ordinance of the City of Jersey City amending Chapter 260 Rent Control, Number 1, imposing a rent freeze on all units subject to rent control during the current public health emergency declared by the Governor of New Jersey, and Number 2, prohibiting any collection of a penalty for late payment of rent as a result of the current public health emergency declared by the Governor. This ordinance will replace.
This is the replacement.
23.
Correct.
Members of the council, I just have one note here. Councilman Solomon, it looks like the version that you uploaded in section 3A, so 260-3A, the existing provision was deleted and just your addition was included. I don't think that was your intent, and we're happy to make that change for the council on Wednesday. I think it was just inadvertently that the existing portion had been deleted and only the additional portion was included. So I think it's an administrative mistake, and we're happy to make that correction for you.
All right. This excludes 1 to 4 family also, correct? Which I read. Except
Councilman, it excludes 1 to 4 family owner occupied.
Right. We can't enforce Airbnb owner occupied. I mean, all right.
Okay.
So, Nick,
okay, is that all right with you, James?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Nick, for catching that.
So Nick, that doesn't require an amendment on the floor, will it?
I don't believe it will, because it was never a part of the change that was made, and I think it was just inadvertently left off. So what I'll do is I'll make the change and put it in a different color. So the rest of the text will be in black. The new changes are in red. I'll put it in blue so the council can clearly see what had been inadvertently omitted for the first reading. But I know from the intent of the council and the intent of Councilman Solomon, it was never the intent to delete that portion of it, which is inadvertently left off. We have a long ordinance with very few changes, and that existing portion was just accidentally left off.
Okay.
Procedurally, though, I just, I don't know.
Sean, if you prefer an amendment, we can certainly do that. If you prefer, I'll make sure that everybody's got a copy of what the existing piece was before we go to the meeting.
I would just prefer that only because of if the public wasn't able to see that portion that was left off, I think we should make the amendment as long as it's not substantial to, that would create another second reading. I think we should definitely make an amendment there on that.
I think procedurally it might be easier and it might be cleaner, so that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And you'll be able to send that, I'm sorry, Council President, you'll be able to send that portion to me as well, right? Nick?
Sean, I can absolutely send it to you, not a problem.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, any other questions on the ordinance? Okay, here we go. So the last second reading ordinance, excuse me, is item number 4.7, City Ordinance 20-037, an ordinance authorizing the business administrator to execute a consent assignment and assumption agreement between the city, Muhlenberg Senior Housing Urban Renewal LLC, and Muhlenberg Gardens Urban Renewal LLC, effectuating the transfer and assignment of the property and tax exemption held by Muhlenberg Senior Housing Urban Renewal LLC to Muhlenberg Gardens Urban Renewal LLC pursuant to the Limited Dividend Nonprofit Housing Corporation or Associations Law, NJSA 55:16-1 exec.
And Council President, I believe we have a guest, Mr. Ali, who's representing Muhlenberg Gardens here with us tonight. The council had some questions last time, so make sure that someone from that entity was here to answer some questions if they had any.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, Council.
Mr. Ali, can you just identify yourself for the record, please?
Oh, absolutely. My name is Farhan Ali. I'm from the law firm of McCarter & English here on behalf of the Muhlenberg Gardens.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions? I know there was some at the last meeting.
Mr. Ali, hi, Rolando Lavaro, City Councilman at Large. So your client is acquiring the property, that's correct, right?
That's
correct. What is their intention with the property in terms of the affordability restrictions as it pertains to that long term?
Well, they're looking to maintain that. The acquiring party is Redwood Housing, is one of the entities that are part of this. They generally, their entire business model is based on overseeing and maintaining affordable housing. So the goal here, and part of the reason why we want to transfer the current exemption in place, is so they can maintain it as low-income housing. I believe currently there's 150 units here of low-income housing that's been in place. There's one unit, I believe, for an on-site superintendent. So they want to maintain that.
And what's their strategy for maintaining when does it expire, and then what's the strategy?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Well, currently the exemption is in place through 2022. That was extended off of the old limited dividend. We have discussed, I think previously with Mr. Hallinan, I know he's moved to the clerk's office, about what we can do once the current pilot expires in 2022. Recently the legislation has passed that, properties that are subject to low-income housing affordability requirements can maintain a pilot beyond the original term. I believe back in the day it was like 40 years, 50 years under the limited dividend law. Now, under the long-term tax exemption law, as long as they maintain the affordability requirements and, provide that benefit to the city, if they're willing, can extend that, can extend the pilot or extend the tax exemption. So it's something we would like to discuss with the council as they're approaching that. But as of right now, since they have the exemption in place and, the property is, and they do maintain low-income housing, that is their plan, is to maintain it as low-income housing.
The limited dividend law that you're referencing, is that state statutes?
It is a state statute. It was actually replaced by the long-term tax exemption law, but a lot of agreements have still been in place for 40, 50 years, so those agreements are still in play and are still allowed to continue even though the law was repealed and replaced by the long-term tax exemption law.
What's the average rent for an apartment?
Give me a moment, I can check that. So I have their rent roll here, just trying to scroll down to the bottom.
This is in Ward D, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
You said what D?
So the way obviously it's a Section 8 housing program. So the rents on for example, 1-bedroom would be $2,200, but the vast majority of that would come from the Hap contracts.
That's low income, 2,200? Oh my God.
Well, no. So
Explain what a HAP contract is.
So the HUD Housing and Urban Development, they set the market value of each unit, but then there's federal assistance and then there's a tenant portion. So the tenants pay the portion based on their income, and the rest is picked up through the HAP contract or through HUD. So I'm looking at the rent roll, which was a part of the application process when we asked for the transfer, and so it shows there. So the resident rent in total for all 151 units is only $37,000. The rest is made up through federal subsidy.
That's $37,000 annually?
Annually, yes.
Yeah, but what's the total rental income you get from all subsidies?
The subsidies for the year.
Section 8, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm actually pulling up. So their rental revenue, their tenant portion, and excuse me, that was monthly. As part of our application, we provided the 2017 year-end audited financial statement. Assistance payments were 1.5 million. Tenant portion payments was 500,000 approximately.
Mm-hmm.
So the total rental revenue for the property was about 2 million.
2 million.
Can you send us a copy of that document?
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Details the rental income.
I know I have it as a PDF that I can email to the council after the caucus. What's the and I apologize. What's the best email to have this sent to so it can be circulated?
Send it to Sean.
You can send it to my attention. It's Sean, SEANG, @jcnj.org.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher.
You're welcome.
And so when you'll see what we send you as part of the application, we provided the audited financial statements for the past 2 years that were complete at the time. So within those, I believe Exhibit C will be the year-end statement of activities, the year-end financial statements with all that information.
Will the tenants see a increase in their rent upon this transfer, or what's going to be the impact on the tenants?
There should be no impact on the tenants. As we set forth, there's no rental increases that will impact the tenants based on the transfer. The entire application is just to because pursuant to the law, although the property is currently exempt through 2022 under the agreement, since our client is acquiring the property, we need the permission of the city to ensure a transfer of that pilot. So there's actually no change to what will be paid to the city. There'll be no impact on what the tenants would be paying at the property.
Is this, I guess, in the near future, correct?
Yes, the closing was originally scheduled for the end of April. I believe, due to the current issues, there's been a little delay, but it's imminent, and we're just waiting on the final approvals to ensure that the deal will go through, which is subject to the transfer of the pilot.
Okay.
The limited dividend law that you referenced, Did you say you would have to come back to the council for a renewal of it or an extension of the tax payment? Does that mean you'd be looking to make, and in my experience, the only way that's been done at this point has been if there are renovations, substantial renovations or improvements to the property, or is there another means by which that's accomplished?
Yes, actually, the recent legislation, I believe it's 48:20-13.2. It's a long-term tax exemption law, allows for an extension. It's also under the NJHMFA law, and I apologize, I don't know the that site off the top of my head, allows for an extension of these low-income projects that are, subject to the affordability requirements. It allows for an extension of these pilots for those projects. Originally, you're correct when you're asking for either an extension, a new pilot, there needed to be some sort of either new construction or substantial rehabilitation. The legislature carved out a different exemption now for low-income housing projects to ensure those are still viable.
Okay. Nick, and can you provide us with that legislation around that?
Sure, Councilman.
That's being referenced. And sir, does your client own any other properties here in the city of Jersey City at this time?
They're actually also obtaining simultaneously when they pick up the Muhlenberg, they're also purchasing the Wittenberg project, which is another low-income housing project nearby. I believe this is their first foray into Jersey City. They do maintain and operate and own, hundreds of other low-income housing units throughout the country, but I think a large portion of that is on the West Coast. So they are purchasing the Muhlenberg and Wittenberg, which is also owned by the same entity.
And what's the name of the company again? Your client?
So it's Redwood Housing, and they've created that urban renewal entity, which I believe we call Muhlenberg Senior Housing. But it's Redwood Housing, and they're out of, I believe they have offices in Texas and on the West Coast, Seattle.
Great. I have no other questions.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Sean. You mute, Sean.
Yep, I apologize for that. So, okay, I'm trying to keep the noise at a bare minimum, right? All right, so on to our public request for a hearing. We have 3 speakers so far, but I do see a couple of emails coming through, so I know that's going to increase a little bit.
Okay.
We have petitions and communications items 6.1 through 6.25, and I just sent the entire council a letter from June Jones, president of the Morris Canal Community Development Corporation. It'll be added to the agenda, as well as petition communication. We do not have any officer communications or report of directors. Claims and the claims, not addendum, just the claims. Everyone has a copy of the claims, and we're going to move right to our resolution, which is item 10.1, City Resolution 20-306, is a resolution of the Municipal Council of the Jersey City extending the grace period for second quarter property taxes until June 1st, 2020.
Any questions?
Brian? Sorry.
Yeah.
Just make sure that this fact sheet reflects my name on it.
The
I emailed you about this.
ten-
And,
you're talking about 10.2?
Yeah, I did.
10.1, correct?
10.1. Yeah, we had already been drafting this resolution at the request of the mayor when you emailed us, but maybe we can add that in the fact sheet as well.
Wouldn't it be more sense to have this June 15th, because a lot of landlords and people are going to be collecting rents, and or they get their Social Security payments on the 1st.
This is the Rich, is the extension that was granted by the governor, so
Yeah, well, why can't we override it?
we can't.
Can't override the go, can't override.
By
the
the
governor.
state
You
of New
know,
Jersey.
I mean, people are going to be getting their social security checks on the first, and they're going to, you can't even get to a bank to cash a check right now. Other people are going to be getting their pension stuff. Not everybody has direct deposit. So, you know, June 15th would have made more sense, or June 10th, to give them time to get the checks cashed.
June 1st is the maximum
I know.
extension that were provided by the governor.
Right.
Correct.
Go ahead, Sean.
All right. Next is item 10.2, is a resolution urging all Jersey City residents to wear non-medical face masks in public.
Okay, Rolando, you want to speak on this and have your doctor?
Sure. Council members, colleagues, introduced this resolution, which is, if you just give me a second while I get myself together around here. That is urging Jersey City residents to wear non-medical face coverings. The language is chosen very specifically, and non-medical face coverings in all public spaces. So that would apply to public parks, which is required already currently as the administration has done the rollout of opening the parks, but it'll include all other public spaces, including sidewalks. Once you kind of step out of your house and you're in public space, and this would urge folks to do that. This is a resolution, as I've discussed with many of you. It's not an ordinance or a law, and so it simply urges folks. It does not provide for any sort of penalties or any fines or any criminal penalties of any sort. From the Centers for Disease Control and other experts and medical experts have all urged the wearing of masks and recommended it from the White House down. And as many of you know, I'm not necessarily one in agreement with the White House on many things, but on this particular matter, we share the same belief in this regard. The duration of it would coincide with the duration of the public health emergency declared by Governor Murphy, and on March 15th, and would end when the governor ends that emergency as well. And it also exempts individuals who would be inhibited due to health reasons, as well as anyone under the age of 2. And thank you, Councilman Solomon, for bringing that to my attention as well. You know, I think as the economies reopen throughout the country, and as the talk turns here in New Jersey, which has been in Jersey City, with being the epicenter of the state of New Jersey with the largest number of cases, that we should continue while we should look to reopen. I think it's important that we continue to send the message that practicing these precautionary measures until such time that an effective treatment is in place or a vaccine, that whatever the new normal looks for us, that folks will have to, in order to prevent the transmission and the spread of the virus, and as people talk about a second wave, that we want to minimize those sort of impacts so that we don't have the same tragic and horrific effects that we've had since March through no fault of anyone. I want to be clear about this. Is not, everybody was taken off guard by this, in many ways, by this terrible virus, and but we should continue to reinforce that message. To that end, I've asked a professor from the Department of Health Sciences at New Jersey City University, Dr. Lilian Rosado, to join us today. And give me 1 second. I just want to pull up her bio so that I can read that into the record as well. My apologies. So Dr. Rosado, and I'm wearing my mask for emphasis. He is a professor at New Jersey City University, where she teaches both in the undergraduate and graduate levels, public health education. Dr. Rosado is a graduate of Columbia University. She was on faculty from 1987 to 1989, where she taught HIV/AIDS education during the HIV epidemic. She has leadership recognition awards from George Washington University, American Cancer Society, and a fellowship award from Humanities and Bioethics in Health Sciences, National Endowment for the Humanities, Rio Pedras, Puerto Rico. Dr. Rosado?
Yes. Can you hear
Thank you
me?
for joining us. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank the City Council for the opportunity of speaking in behalf of this resolution to stop the spread and the speed of the virus that causes COVID-19 by using face coverings in Jersey City. So I just want to talk a little bit about our students from Hudson County. About 60% of our students are from Hudson County, and Hudson County presently has the second largest number of cases with the virus. When our students graduate from our program, they proudly return to the community as public health educators. Many of our students are working in the front lines of the pandemic. They are the nurses, hospital intake clerks, health educators, and school nurses, to name some. Our students have suffered losses, both human and economic. They are trained to understand the enormity of the problem. This is a public health national emergency. COVID-19 is a new virus. It has entered our community and it is widespread and it does not discriminate. We need to remember, as government slowly starts to lift restrictions, that there is no cure for the virus. There are ventilators to help people breathe. There are ways to treat inflamed airways, but there is no cure for the virus. And while scientists are working on the vaccine, government and community have a collective responsibility to practice health protection and prevention. The collective responsibility is to stop the spread of the virus. We must trust the basic health tenets, that there is science behind social distancing, there is science behind hand washing, and there is science behind wearing a face covering. There is historical data, modeling data, observational data on the effectiveness of these measures. Face covering is a public health investment. It is an investment for the community. And to profile the health of the community, an indicator of poor health are the differences in social position. It is due to the level of education, race, ethnicity, zip code, income, and the burden of underlying existing diseases and viruses, which takes a disproportionate toll on Black and Brown communities and the workforce. And I want to talk a little bit about the workforce. In the absence of a national sick leave policy, our workforce is at risk. They represent the underemployed, the part-time worker, and the millennials, a portion of which are NJCU students. Millennials make up a large portion of the workforce. They are less likely to have health insurance and are more likely to live in poverty. They had the largest number of single mother households. We have to recognize that we are dependent on an entire workforce who are made up of minority populations. These are the populations most affected by the pandemic. This population cannot work from home. The face covering is a call to action. Actions to prevent you and a workforce who cannot work from home from getting the virus. The advanced virus tracking models from Rutgers University shows that without community safety measures and social distancing measures, that the person-to-person contact spread would be 1 in 7 people infected. Using the safety precautions, we can expect 1.4 people will be infected. So what does the Disease Control and Prevention recommend? They recommend that wearing face masks used with other public health measures such as social distancing, staying at home if you can to slow the spread of the disease, of the virus, This will help people who do not know they have the virus and will keep them from spreading it and transmitting it to others. This is a basic health measure to empower communities. So I just want to end with the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, "Tomorrow is today. We are faced with the fierce urgency of now." In the words of a New Jersey City University student, at the very least, wearing a face covering in public should be a symbol of solidarity with healthcare providers, first-line responders, and a sign of unity in the community to combat the virus. But most of all, it should be a reminder that we are all in this together and we are all at risk. I believe that passing the resolution will impact the primary care sector and the primary care needs of the community to sustain essential services going forward and reopening even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Rosado.
Is there any questions?
So I have a question.
Okay.
So when I read this, I mean, I texted Rolando and I was like very happy he was doing this. My concern is, Rolando, were you able to speak to Stacy Flanagan or any of the hospital leadership in reference to this? I actually thought that Dr. Rosado, I mean, we shared some of the same credentials, so I'm really happy for that, you know, and I understood a lot of the stuff that she said. But I think that although I am in support of this, you know, I think it's if we're gonna have also people to speak on this, it's important to, you know, have some like people with a epidemiology background on this so they can better explain it as well. I mean, you know, the way Dr. Rosado explained it was good, but it's good to have basically meat and potato studies so that the public could know the serious effects on what could go on or what's happening with this virus. A little concern that I had was in the beginning, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said not hospital masks, or is every mask included in there? Like, for example, there are some people that have underlying issues that require, you know, N95s, and, you know, is there a problem if those people have these types of masks?
No, look, I think if they, for medical reasons, if they need a mask, this is just urging the general public as a whole to wear masks. And so I think with the CDC warning, I'm saying CDC recommendation, the idea of saying non-medical masks was that there's a shortage of N95s and medical masks. So we don't want everybody suddenly just buying up a whole bunch of medical masks and
got it.
And yeah.
How about in terms of Stacy Flanagan, the director of HHS? Did you reach out to her in reference to this or no?
I mean, I haven't discussed it with her directly. We did talk back in late March, and I was on a conference call with the administration officials as well, and talked about, I suggested then about actually having a policy, meaning a law of some sort, or at the time kind of pitching an executive order of requiring mask wearing at that time, and trying to provide masks for every Jersey City resident, meaning the city of Jersey City providing masks and distributing that. At that time, that didn't happen, and the timing of that, and while I think we're seeing our numbers, the number of cases decrease, the number of positive cases decrease, hospitalizations, things seem to be trending in the right direction. And as we reopen the economy, and I think as everyone saw over the past several days when the weather's gotten a lot warmer, this is just to reemphasize that message of wearing a mask, but social distancing as well, and washing hands, and doing everything that's necessary around that to continue to slow and prevent the transmission of the disease and further outbreaks.
Right. I mean, in just, this is my personal opinion, and again, strictly my personal opinion. I don't think we're going to be seeing an end to masks anytime soon. I don't think the governor is going to be lifting this anytime soon. With that said, I think being that you've already started to bring in advocates for this, I think moving forward, I think that we should definitely, link up, with our Director of Health and Human Services. She has also a great team, as well as she's connected with the Jersey City Medical Center research team, the epidemiology team, both in the county, but she's very connected with Christ Hospital as well, and they have an actual research study showing what's going on. So I think that I think moving forward, I think we should bring those people to our virtual meetings so that they can also address, and piggyback from what Dr. Rosado said as well, which I think was pretty good. But I think those people are important to be to recognize and bring them, to the table as well.
I welcome them coming to the table, and I welcome a big campaign to send the message out resoundingly, right, so that people really get this, and that they don't forget that, that a lot of lives have been lost already.
Right, but I support this 100%.
Great, thank you, Councilman. Anyone else have questions for myself or Dr. Rosado, or comments?
I have a question, and I understand that this is just urging people to wear the mask and not necessarily a mandate, but where, I guess, do we stand in regards to exercise, like joggers and having their mask on? I know that that's been coming up a lot lately from people saying that it's difficult to work out or to run with the masks on, and that, it could cause them to have other issues similar to the lady that got into a car accident from wearing her mask too long.
And I think, and I'm sorry to just jump into this, and I think this is what I mean about getting more people involved in that are more acclimated. Again, Dr. Rosado is extremely, acclimated with this, and she's 100% on point. But I think that we need to get people engaged that can better answer those questions that are in the forefront of these concerns, because there has been, people are it's not just a phobia, it's just a big concern of a jogger that can jog by me without a mask or with a mask. Is that jogger having the right mask? So I mean, it's a very big, interesting globe that we're presenting here. And I think the more people that are engaged in the questions and concerns and the scientific questions and concerns, it's important for them to be on the table as well.
Rolando, a lot of joggers are coming down with the virus. Another issue we should be talking about is taking vitamin D and vitamin C. Speak to doctors, including my brother, who's a specialist in this. Vitamin D is probably the most important thing for people to do right now.
We should do a resolution on that too.
No.
I agree. Listen, you have vitamin C right here.
I mean,
vitamin D is more important. That's the
I've got my vitamin D. It's in the bathroom right now.
And to the point that I'm trying to make, and guys, to the point that I'm trying to make, and to the public, is that this type of conversation, and that, like when Councilman Rolando Navarro sent that information to me, I knew that this was going to bring up a lot of conversation and a lot of concerns with loose ends. I knew that was going to happen. So I think that, getting everybody engaged, like Councilman, you said, there are other preventative ways, via medicine, via off-the-counter medicines, via all kinds of things that could, help us, and everybody's eager to find out, a maybe a comfort level for this virus. So, I mean, it's a subject and a conversation that it's not going to be closed anytime soon, and we should definitely welcome people that have extra concerns, even our own colleagues here that have concerns. So it's something that we're going to be, involved in a lot.
So let me just go back to, and I appreciate all of those comments, Councilman Rivera. Just to Councilperson Ridley's question, Dr. Rosado, are you still there?
Yes, I am. And I just want a personal note. I'm a runner and I do run with the mask, and I haven't found any difficulty doing that, but that's just me, and it's a personal note that I'm making. I see a lot of people in the winter without this virus using masks because it helps them not take in so much cold air when they're running. So I've noticed that even, before the virus, that there were people that would wear the mask in cold weather when they ran. So there's a lot of differences regarding wearing a mask when you're exercising. There's a lot of home videos for exercising. There's a lot of jogging in place. There's so many things going on today that exercise has become digitalized. So they can use a digital platform to exercise, and I think that it's a sacrifice for right now until society gets better.
Listen, I'm not a runner, and for those who know me, right? So no one will confuse me with a marathon or a triathlon or anything like that, triathlete. But I will say this is that the information that's out there talks about that the need for the mask is not necessarily for the individual's protection wearing the mask, but it's for the protection of other people because of the virus being transmitted from the person who may be asymptomatic and so forth around that, or may have symptoms themselves, and or just the onset of symptoms. And so they're transmitted through droplets, as I've read and heard, and
yes, that's right.
And so a runner and I've heard from people who are runners and or just being passed by runners, and just how they've been very much terrified by the idea of somebody passing by them who's breathing heavily, and that they can feel see the sweat and the other things that are being emitted from the mouth and so forth around that. I think it's necessary for everyone to wear a mask, particularly in those circumstances. Now, I can understand if it's confining to somebody who may have certain issues and certainly wouldn't want anyone to endanger their health around that. And this is urging folks, and people should use their judgment for their own individual health as well. Like nobody wants anyone to see anyone suffocating or anything of that nature because they're wearing a mask.
That's right. Yes, I agree.
Any other questions or comments? None? Great. Thank you all. Hope we can have you.
Dr. Rosado.
Thank you, Dr. Rosado.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is item 10.3, City Ordinance 20-308 is a resolution authorizing the City of Jersey City to accept various gifts to assist with local response to the coronavirus pandemic. Any questions? Okay, item 10.4, City Resolution 20-309. Resolution authorizing the execution of a mortgage subordination agreement affecting the property known as 174 Armstrong Avenue in Jersey City.
Is Carmen here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So so both the 10.4 and 10.5, they're different programs. One was the Golden Neighborhood Homeowners Program, the other one the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. But in both cases, and I don't know why I've never picked up on this because we go through so many of these before. The homeowners received a loan from the city, from DCD, on the condition that the property be owned and occupied as low and moderate income housing. And so my question is a couple of things. Number one, does the property have to be owner occupied? And that's part of the condition. Will this subordination, does that affect in any way that low and moderate income housing requirement? Or does that remain intact with the change in the mortgage as such? And then a third question there is what happens if they should sell the property, or what conditions are there for the sale of the property when they have these sort of things. I can email all this to you. And I just wanted to know for both of these 10.4 and 10.5, what was the applicant's income at the time of the home purchase? And if we are checking when they're through this refinancing, which is what they're doing here, do we check their income at that to verify that they're what their income eligibility was, which was verified at the time of the purchase and at the time that they received the loan from the city. But at the time at which they're looking to refinance, I know the banks are looking at their income and looking at their credit history and all that other stuff to see what if they're a safe bet for refinancing, and to what numbers that they give them in terms of interest rates and so forth. But I'm wondering if we're doing the same thing as well. And that's all my questions. So I'll send it over to you, Brian, if we can get that to Carmen.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? All right, so if I can just read into the record 10.5, resolution 20-310. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of a mortgage subordination agreement affecting the property known as 133 Clerk Street in Jersey City. Item 10.6, resolution 20-311 is a resolution accepting grant funds for the summer expansion program from the New Jersey Department of Law and Public Safety.
Council members, I know this is for a summer program, but we decided that it's best to accept the funds and determine down the road if there's going to be any changes or amendments to any of our summer programs, that we can deal with that accordingly. Worst case, we wouldn't want to reject any funds in case we needed them.
Yep.
Brian, do we have to, is there a certain amount of time that we have to use the funds? Like if it's not used this summer, can that money transfer to next year, or is it you have to use it in a certain amount of time?
Let us confirm that. I'm actually not sure about that. We typically always spend every penny of this, and we usually end up pulling from other funding sources to make up some of the differences in the things we're doing with it. But I'll confirm with that.
Okay.
Okay. Item 10.
Can I just ask on 10.6? Sorry, Brian. In the past, this is for like a mural type program and so forth for the summer. If we should get there, I've asked in the past for the Clean Communities program funding and the spend down on those. I'm just going to reiterate that request. I don't think I've ever received that information in the past about the Clean Communities program. If I could get that for the 2019 and 2020 spends at this point.
Sure thing.
And then the last thing is, as part of the application for this one, it references that there were 28 past participants. Could we get some more information about who participated? I don't know what kind of information they kept, whether demographic information, geographic information, what parts of the city, and as well as demographics, race, ethnicity, gender, ages, schools. Be great to know.
We'll try to get some information about the participants, no problem.
Thanks.
Okay. Item 10.7, resolution 20-312 is a resolution authorizing the execution of a grant agreement and the acceptance of a grant award from Meals on Wheels America. Okay, item 10.8 is resolution 20-313, resolution accepting funds from the 2020 Arbor Day tree grant from the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority. Item 10.9, resolution 20-314, resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City authorizing the acceptance of the USA Swimming Foundation Local Partners Program Grant Award for the Jersey City Department of Recreation and Youth Development and the execution of a letter of agreement. Item 10.10, Resolution 20-315 is a resolution authorizing an agreement with Network Management Solutions for providing maintenance and support services for the Department of Public Safety, network, computer and infrastructure, and related items without public bidding.
Sean, why isn't no public bidding, Sean?
I believe this is a state contract.
All right.
Just a question about this. So in the fact sheet, it says the city spent 393,000. It wasn't clear to me whether that was for each year or for 3 years. It says 393,000, 3 years, something like that. Can you just get clarification on that? Because this contract is for 397,000, so I assume it's 393,000 each year, but just wanted to get confirmation.
Yeah, sure. I'll confirm.
And then just on 10.10, 10.11, and 10.12, on all of them, the start date is January 1st. They're very late. I just want to bring that to the attention. And I know that we've had the coronavirus, but this predated the coronavirus by a long shot. So I mean, this has been raised in the past, I guess, with regard to kind of lateness, and certainly this coronavirus can certainly understand if it was a little bit late, but these are extraordinarily late. Okay.
Yeah, noted.
Thanks.
Okay. Item 10.11, Resolution 20-316. The resolution authorizing an agreement with Fisher Telecom LLC for providing the maintenance and support services with the Department of Public Safety Aviat phone system without public bidding. Could be mispronouncing that. I apologize.
Once again, why no public bidding?
Oh, this is because for both of those, Councilman, they're proprietary systems. So the law exempts it from being publicly bid for a proprietary system.
All right.
I'm assuming it's the same vendors, the same who created probably the system, but that's an assumption on my part.
Okay. Item 10.12, Resolution 20-317. It's a resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Millennium Communications Group, Inc. for managed blocks of our support contract under state contract for the Department of Public Safety Communications Center. Item 10.13, Resolution 20-318 is a resolution authorizing an award of a contract to Kruger International, Inc. for the purchase, delivery, and installation of office furniture for City Hall, Council Office, project number 2020-007 through the Educational Services Commission of New Jersey, formerly Middlesex Regional Education Services Commission.
Yeah, this is what, $179,000 for the furniture?
Yeah.
And who's paying for this, Brian?
It's coming out of, what's the account on here? It's capital dollars for City Hall improvements.
All right, I'd rather have back our temporary aides, our part-time aides, than spending money on furniture right now. I mean, that's a lot of money.
We'll defer to council on how you want to proceed here. We figured we'd put it forward and just get some feedback. We can't unfortunately use capital dollars to fill holes in the operating budget.
That's not the point. The point is we're spending money like crazy, but we have no money. I mean, you released our part-time aides, which were very helpful. Huh?
Okay.
Right. Item 10. Sorry, were we finished?
Yeah,
okay.
But I think we're at this point, spending $179,000 on furniture is a little out of whack.
Okay.
Is it all furniture? I'm confused. I thought it was more than just furniture.
Yeah, it's furniture, but it's also partitions and sound deadening equipment as well that goes in the partitions. So yeah, it's more than just desks and chairs.
Okay. Taking those like
Since we're talking, since you mentioned partitions, are we looking at reconfiguring office spaces and things of that nature to?
Yeah, we are. We're just starting to look at that. There's a lot of options out there that help improve the safety of our offices, in addition to the social distancing requirements that we put in place. At this point, most of our staff are either working from home or spread out enough or working in shifts that, we don't have a urgent need for this right now. But as we think about opening up the city and bringing people back to work, absolutely something we're talking about, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, item 10.14, resolution 20-319 is a resolution ratifying the emergency contract award to P&G Restoration for the cleanup and of the asbestos at City Hall for the Department of Administration, Division of Engineering, Traffic, and Transportation. Item 10.15, resolution 20-320, resolution ratifying an emergency contract award to ACV Environmental Services, Inc. for decontamination services at various city-owned buildings due to positive cases of the coronavirus.
Yep, go ahead, Councilman.
That's another tremendous expense, $186,000. I know they spent $50,000 a month ago to clean out 2 firehouses. I mean, isn't this kind of expensive, Brian?
Absolutely very expensive. At the time that we were moving forward with this service, we didn't really know a lot of the other options that were out there, and it was an emergency, very urgent emergency that we were decontaminating certain facilities and vehicles and that sort of thing. We have since moved on to a more efficient and less costly process. We're using equipment that we already had and sanitizing solutions and using our own devices and sprayers to clean and sanitize offices internally. So there's very little cost at this point moving forward to sanitize any space that's needed. I will also say that this is something that we fully expect to be reimbursed by some of the FEMA dollars that are coming through to Jersey City and other municipalities.
All right.
Okay, item 10.16, resolution 20-321 is a resolution authorizing the award of a professional service contract to CP Engineers LLC in connection with the engineering services for Reservoir Number 3, safety improvements, project number 2019-007 for the Department of Administration, Division of Architecture. Item 10.17, resolution 20-322 is a resolution amending and renewing the professional service agreement with Light de Palmer Greenberg LLC to represent the City of Jersey City and individually named defendants in various lawsuits related to the Department of Recreation and Youth Development. Item 10.18, resolution 20-323, a resolution authorizing the award of professional service contract to Road Data Corporation to collect pavement data, develop a pavement management program, provide training to necessary city employees, and perform project administration during the project for the Department of Administration, Division of Engineering, Traffic, and Transportation.
So I just want to add a few additional comments to this resolution. This is a piece of technology that is going to help us much more efficiently understand what streets need urgent attention as far as resurfacing goes, including potholes. It has a sort of a ability to process the images of the road itself. It has a device. We basically use a device and drive around the entire city, take many pictures of the roads in the city, and through an analysis of those pictures, we have a report that gets sent to us that tells us exactly the pavement condition of each street. So instead of the way we do it now, in prioritizing which streets we resurface, which is whoever is putting requests in to see Click Fix, or whoever you're hearing from at community meetings, we're going to have a very fair system that shows everyone with full transparency exactly the quality of every street, and we can prioritize that way. It's a much more efficient process to do it.
So in terms of, I mean, there is someone on staff who, I believe, assesses the quality or condition of a road before it gets, before any road work is done, isn't it? So will this replace that function essentially?
No, that there's a function that, yes, that's correct, in that if we're going to resurface a road and someone makes a request, for example, Grant Street, we get requests to resurface the road, somebody will go out and analyze that and tell us if it's appropriate for resurfacing. This would partially replace that in the sense that we would already know the pavement quality of every street in the entire city, and we would know from a technology and a fair analysis standpoint what streets would be coming, what streets we should prioritize in the entire city. So we would have a better idea and more context around those requests that come in. We would still need somebody to physically go out and inspect and confirm before we would start any work, though.
Do you anticipate saving money with this new?
Yeah. There
technology?
are a couple of benefits to this. The one benefit is that we will make sure that we are targeting the streets with the worst pavement quality as quickly as we can. And the benefit there is that just because somebody doesn't know how to use Click Fix or doesn't make a report or call their council person, we're still going to be addressing their streets. The cost savings on the city side is that we're going to be hopefully resurfacing streets before they get to a point where they're totally degraded and full of potholes. We're going to know and be able to anticipate, and through several quarters of analysis, we're going to hopefully be able to predict exactly how long it takes for the road to deteriorate to a point where we're going to need to resurface, and hopefully avoid getting to the point where we're filling lots of potholes in the street. We'll be able to resurface ahead of that and save money there.
So are we going to need this contract on an annual basis, or is this?
We're going to see how it goes this year and see what the data looks like. We probably won't need it annually. We probably may do it like once every 5 years or every few years or something like that, just to get a quick analysis and see how things go.
Is this technology that someone in-house could learn to use and then be able to apply it?
Yeah, that is the intent. However, the main piece of technology we're purchasing is the analytics software that processes the images of the street. That's something that we can't teach somebody how to do. It's really just a question of driving around town with a vehicle and a camera device on the vehicle taking all the pictures. The hardware is the main thing we're buying, and the software.
Mm-hmm. And was this budgeted for, or is this what dollar source is being used for this?
It's a small amount of money. It's coming out of. Let me just confirm the account here. It is. I actually don't remember what this account is, but it's a small amount of money. It's. I'll confirm what the purpose of this account, but it was not previously budgeted. But it's something that is going to go a long way into making our street paving and pothole filling operations more efficient.
I see. I have no further questions.
Anyone else? Okay. On to item.
I'm sorry. Before you proceed, Council President, may I ask? I'm sorry, I missed that 10.17. Can we get an update on this the status of this litigation?
Should we have a closed session on this?
You're muted, Council President. You're muted.
Yeah, sure. We could do that as a closed session. Council President, we'll work with you to find a suitable date and time.
Okay, we'll do it as a closed session.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
And just point of orders, just to order to go to a closed session, we're going to need a resolution to be added to the agenda with the date and time of that closed session.
Okay.
Council President, I will email you and your secretary and aide, and we'll work on finding a time. And if we can get that
Okay.
before Wednesday, we'll get the resolution prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Wasn't me, Sean.
I didn't accuse anyone. Okay, item 10.19, Resolution 20-324, resolution ratifying emergency contract award to Gold Type Business Machines Incorporated for the purchase and delivery of personal protection equipment, face masks due to coronavirus for the Office of Emergency Management Homeland Security, funded through the fiscal year 19 Urban Area Security Initiative Grant.
Mhm. Questions? All right, Sean.
Very good. Item 10.20, Resolution 20-325 is a resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City authorizing the acceptance and execution of the HUD entitlement grant agreements for CDBG, ESG, HOPWA, and HOME, and authorizing program contracts under the HUD entitlement programs for program year April 1st, 2019 through March 31st, 2020.
Just, these awards are for a period that's already expired now. Are we certain that these grantees, because they would have had to have expended the money already and seeking reimbursement here? Have we verified that, in fact, that they did expend the money before we award them a contract that that they won't be able to spend down on because the period has expired?
Brian, can you tell Carmen Gandela to send us an email on that, like tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll get her to follow up on this. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Second one too. Go ahead, Sean.
Okay. So the next one is item 10.21, Resolution 20-326, the resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City amending Resolution Council Resolution 101 and 18.414, authorizing the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and Home Investments Partnership Program contracts with Ocean MLK Urban Renewal Associates Scattered Sites Project, and authorizing the execution of the First Amendment to the AHTF contract and the First Amendment to the Home contract, and the execution of mortgage modification agreements for the AHTF loan and home loan.
So
We
we can
need Carmen.
direct
Yeah,
Carmen.
yes.
What's going on here? This is another
Yeah,
appropriation.
Right.
There's a memo attached here that hopefully answers some of these questions. But if there's anything else,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Item 10.22, Resolution 20-327, resolution award of a contract to Safeware Inc. Incorporation for computer-aided dispatch records management, property, and evidence management modules through the Omina Partners Coop, formerly known as the U.S. Communities Government Purchasing Alliance for the Department of Public Safety Communications Center.
this is for Mark 43. It is the computer dispatch system for police and fire. Well, for police at this point.
Thanks, Brian. Item 10.23, Resolution 20-328 is a resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City authorizing program contracts under the Community Service Block Grant for program year January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. Item 10.24, Resolution 20-329, a resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City to amend Council Resolution 16-669 and 16-340 that authorize an Affordable House Trust Fund and Home Investments Partnership Program agreements with Terzetto, LLC, and authorizing the execution of First Amendment to a HTF contract and the execution of the mortgage modification agreement.
You need Carmen still.
Okay. Item 10.25, Resolution 20-330. It's a resolution awarding professional service agreement with Law Office of Murphy Orlando, LLC, for the general legal services related to employment organizational practices.
Just as a quick update there, I'm aware that we owe the council some information from last week's closed session. We will get that to you before the meeting on Wednesday, and if not, we will withdraw and we'll put it off for another meeting if we're unable to compile that for you.
You're talking about the cost, right, Peter?
Yes.
Well, that was the one item I believe that was changed. If that has not been changed,
Yes.
it will be
Correct.
changed. Yeah.
Yes.
The cost.
Okay, Peter. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Resolution 10.26, item number 10.26, Resolution 20-331 is a resolution declaring an emergency to make the effective date of Ordinance 20-3033 the date of its approval by the mayor. This resolution will be withdrawn or mute when the ordinance is defeated. So we'll withdraw it after the defeation of the after the ordinance is defeated. Next resolution is item 10.27, Resolution 20-332 is a resolution declaring an emergency to make the effective date of Ordinance 20-036 the date of its approval by the mayor. Item 10.28, which is a late item, Resolution 20-333, a resolution authorizing the Jersey City Police Department to submit an application applying for funding from the U.S. Department of Justice Programs Bureau of Justice Assistance for the participation in the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program Solicitation Fiscal Year 2020 Formula Grant. Next late item would be item 10.29, Resolution 20-334 is a resolution repealing the Resolution 20-027, directing the city clerk to submit a public question at the next general election to be held on November 3rd, changing the classification of the Jersey City Board of Education from an elective school board type 2 board to an appointed school board type 1 board. And the last resolution will be added, will be that closed session with the date and time to be determined.
There's also one more that we discussed earlier. It's going to be a late walk-on. It's for a contract to a vendor that's going to help us go through the FEMA reimbursement process and help us get money. And again, that vendor is 100% FEMA reimbursable as well, so it's not going to be any additional cost at the end of all this to the city.
Hopefully.
That will be 10.31, item 10.31.
Yeah, that'll be, once we get the final approval internally, we'll send it to the council and get it on.
Excellent. Although, just for the council's knowledge that we will have to take a vote to add these late items onto the agenda at the regular meeting, which on Wednesday. So with that being said, I believe we have a presentation from Barker through the Division of Engineering and Traffic and Transportation, and there was a list of number of individuals that are with Barker. So I'm going to turn it over to the council president.
Okay, Barker, is she on yet? Is she here?
Hello, I'm here.
Oh, okay, Barker, we'll turn it into your hand and you can do your presentation, okay?
Great. Thank you. Good evening, council members, and thank you to Council President and the Business Administrator for including this presentation on the agenda tonight. I am joined by our consultant team to present to you the major findings and the recommendations of the citywide parking study, which has been under development over the past year. This is the first time that the city is undertaking a comprehensive parking management plan, and so we're in the final stages now and are excited to present all the findings to you. We did publicize this presentation, so I do want to welcome members of the public and quickly recap how the presentation will be structured. So because caucus meetings are a public forum but are not set up to accept public comment, we will accept public comments in the question and answer function of this live meeting and also via email at cityplanning@jcnj.org. The recording of the meeting will of course be available immediately after this meeting ends at jcnj.org/VCM and on the Jersey City TV YouTube channel in the next few days. And all of the materials that we present to you today and more are available on the city website at jcnj.org/parking plan. So we'll post all of that in this Q&A so everyone has it in writing. Moving to the presentation itself, this plan was developed with grant funds from the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority and was developed with participation from various city agencies and also with the help of an external consultant team. So I'm going to hand it over to the consultant team now to go through the PowerPoint. Eric Swenson will start by providing an overview of the study. Margaret Newman will speak about the overall project approach. Michael Ahilin will review all of the outreach, and then Michael and Eric will take turns talking about each of the recommendations of the study. Rachel will lead the Q&A at the end, and Council President, if you'll allow it, we would like to hold questions until the end, just to make things a little easier. Okay,
no
great.
problem.
Great. So Eric will now share his screen and begin the presentation.
Hi, Barca. Thank you. Give me a moment to, let's see if I can get this to work here. Are you seeing the first slide?
No.
No, Eric, we just see you.
Okay, hold on. Let me try that again. What about now?
Yes.
Yep.
You still see it?
Yep.
Yeah, we see the screen.
Okay, what about second
We
slide
see the
now?
presentation.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, thank you, Barker, for that introduction. Here's the agenda for our presentation, which is about 30 minutes. Again, my name is Eric Swenson. I'm from Arup. We're the prime consultant on the consultant team. We also have Margaret Newman from Arup and Michael Ahilin from Fitzgerald and Halliday, who will be presenting on outreach, and Rachel Weinberger from Weinberger and Associates will be helping us wrap up and be leading the Q&A at the end. So here's the agenda. The purpose of this presentation is really to study, summarize the study's findings, provide details of the strategies that we've selected, and we want to allow some time at the end for Q&A. Okay, so I'll start with the project overview. So this has been a year-long study. What have we accomplished so far? We've done ward meetings in each of the wards. We've held a public workshop. We have held stakeholder and TAC meetings. We have compiled data and to the extent that we could get our hands on, and we've identified gaps in that data for the city to pay, which we'll talk about later. And of course, we've developed strategies and gotten public feedback on that. So we're getting close to the end of the study period, and really the next major milestone is to finish the final report. Okay. Moving to the next slide. What was the study intended to show us? The three major objectives were to create an inventory of what types of parking supply are found across the city, to identify gaps in the data, especially anything data related that's needed to advance parking management solutions. And part of that also includes the feedback we got from city residents and stakeholders to identify major issues related to parking. Finally, we've developed strategies that are both innovative based on the latest best practices happening nationally and internationally, as well as made sure based on the feedback that these are adapted to Jersey City's unique conditions. So here's some of what's come out of the inventory. To develop this inventory, we gathered the available data. Some of the gaps that we identified that the city will still need to fill are include capacity in private garages, usage and occupancy info, and also more detailed data that applies to certain types of spaces. For example, at metered spaces, it's good to know turnover, or how often cars change, how often the space is turned over to a different car. We gathered as much off-street data as possible. You can see the numbers here for off-street. We've confirmed most of the commercial garage data. The biggest data gaps in terms of the off-street data are private accessory use garages, meaning those that are privately owned but only for the tenants or residents of the building. We don't have much in the way of information for those in terms of capacity, and we don't have usage or occupancy info throughout the day or averaged. Another thing we did as part of this is comb through the parking zones that are in the Code of Ordinances, and that gave us an idea of the complexity of the zone parking system, and we were also able to determine the boundaries of the various zones with precision, and we've mapped those as well, although I don't show those here. So we ran an analysis to compute the amount of on-street parking throughout the city, and you can see some of this data summarized in this table here. This allows comparisons, for example, by ward. So if you're looking at this table here, you can compare the total linear miles of streets in each ward, which is the third column there that says total curb length. And then compare that to the number of linear miles with parking permitted. So that would be the next column. So you can see, for example, in Ward A, 33 miles allow parking, there's parking permitted out of a total length of curb of 56 miles. Obviously, not all of that could be used. That's 59%, as you can see there. Obviously, you need some of that space for hydrants and driveways and so forth, but it gives an idea. And some of the things you can see here is, for example, this illustrates how wards like A and D have fewer spaces than the very dense Ward E, and that's because of curb cuts or driveways. Data doesn't tell the whole story, so I will pass it over to Margaret for this next couple of slides.
Thanks, Eric. So I just wanted to speak a little bit to this point about how we use data to predict and to talk about what future scenarios might develop. I speak to some degree from both from the work we've been doing on this study, but also from my own work. I was the chief of staff in the New York City Department of Transportation during the Bloomberg administration. And so we made quite a lot of parking changes during that period. And so one of the things I learned is parking is both about numbers, but it's also a highly political process. And so we understand that everyone has an interest in it. Everyone has a different story and experience. So one of the things we just wanted to stress here is that although we've got a fair bit of data, that the existing conditions, which tell us how many spaces there are and how they are occupied currently, won't necessarily inform how future programs will perform. And I think it's very important that other cities who, like San Francisco and Seattle, who have used pilot projects, and New York City as well, to do trial and error to make sure that the programs that we implement will achieve the desired goals. And so we think that parking modeling, which I think was an early intent of this project, would have limited use and that they can't possibly account for scenarios. Next slide, Eric. So our plan moving forward is that we're going to make a series of recommendations, which we'll describe at the end of the PowerPoint. And some of these are very short term and can be easily implemented. Some of them will be longer term that will require either more data collection or more research. And the recommendations ultimately are really, their primary goal is to create better parking management and utilize what existing parking that you have, which occupies obviously some very important real estate in your city. And so we're advocating for the use of pilot programs, and then some of the recommendations will be informed by the existing data, and some of them will be a kind of trial and error as we move forward. So to further describe some of our work, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to go through some of the public outreach.
Thanks, Margaret. So I'm going to start by just saying you can certainly always do more outreach, especially on a parking study, which, as Margaret mentioned, can be highly political and raise a lot of concerns. That said, the study that we just undertook, or that we're undertaking right now, it had a much more robust outreach effort than I've had on a number of other parking study projects. There can certainly always be more, which I do have some recommendations for how public outreach can continue. But I did want to note that we had a great public outreach process, and we reached a lot of community members. You'll see on the next slide the major public outreach milestones, the level of participation, and how the outreach events informed the technical process. We started last summer with ward listening sessions. We went to all 6 wards, and in total we had nearly 200 participants at those meetings. Those ward meetings served as the basis for the entire project going forward. We found out about existing conditions, key challenges, and then we heard from the public what they thought their potential solutions were to the parking challenges they were facing in their neighborhood. We used that input and that understanding to develop an e-survey where we could take a deeper dive into these perspectives and the existing conditions. This helped us draft some strategies and then also form the draft report, which is currently being developed. So in total, there were more than 2,500 participants to the e-survey. We had a great participation for that. We furthered our public engagement by doing a public workshop in February where we had 52 participants, and then a week later we had a stakeholder meeting from representatives from the SIDS. Together, these all helped inform the draft report. And then, of course, here we are today, late spring 2020, with the council presentation, and we're launching into a 2-week public comment period, which will inform the final report. On the next slide, I wanted to share with you the differing levels of participation across the city. We made an effort to distribute the public outreach events shown in with the gray dots throughout in all the different wards of the city. The underlying layer are the density of survey responses. More than half of the survey responses came from wards D and Ward E. It was great to see that level of feedback and that level of participation. However, one of the recommendations that we have from this plan is to do additional engagement. Oops, did I lose people?
I just got kicked off from my slides. Let me try to present again.
Okay, well, I can just say one of the recommendations from the in the outreach is to do additional engagement in some of the other wards. In particular, Ward A and Ward F had lower participation rates on the survey, so having additional meetings there is definitely recommended.
Let me try to share again.
Okay.
Something has somehow it bumped it off and said someone
Eric,
else share.
Eric,
Yes.
stop sharing first and then start again.
Okay. Let me see here. Stop sharing. Are you sure you want to share? It says something is being shared. Is that me? Bernadette?
I believe it is.
Let me just, hold on. Just close out of this.
You should be able to go ahead and
try
say,
it.
okay, yeah.
Okay, looks like it's back up.
You're back.
Okay.
Great. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, great. So I do want to emphasize that all of the outreach summaries will be made available to you. I took diligent notes at all of these meetings and tried to capture every single perspective that came into these meetings. So those are definitely available, and they'll be in the appendix of the draft plan. So there were a lot of concerns that came up overall and through the process. For now, I'll just highlight 4 of them. I'll start with parking availability because it is a very frequently mentioned concern, and a lot of community members are looking for centralized parking garages, shared parking initiatives as ways to address the lack of availability in their neighborhood. I will say that there are evidence in the survey, as well as kind of some anecdotal experiences at the ward meetings and the workshop, suggests that Ward D residents are having a harder time finding a parking spot than other communities. That said, every community reported this, so this is a real concern among people across the city. For curb cuts, curb cuts have a tendency, I'll talk about this a little bit more later in the presentation, but they reduce on-street spaces, and this is something that was mentioned at every ward meeting we attended, and it came up often in the survey responses as well. Occasionally, members of the public said that they would like to add a curb cut so that they could have a driveway. However, the majority of people who participate in our process wanted to see a reduction in curb cuts overall. Next, enforcement. This is a really important issue and one that we definitely got different messages on throughout the process. There wasn't necessarily consensus that there's too much or too little enforcement. I will say that according to the survey responses, people in most of the wards, residents of most of the wards, would like to see increased enforcement. I will note that Ward A was the only ward where they wanted to see decreased enforcement. This could be an equity concern. This could have to do with the lack of off-street options in Ward A. There could be a number of factors here, which is why in this plan we're recommending additional outreach specifically focused on enforcement and having those meetings in Ward A and Ward F to clarify the perspectives there. And then last, transit access. So transit access was seen by many as a potential solution. I heard a lot of residents, particularly from Ward F, but also in wards throughout the city, expressing a strong desire to see improved transit access. Some even said that they'd be willing to give up their car if they had reliable access to transit. I will note that all of these meetings took place before the official launch of the VIA service, so it'll be interesting to see how these perspectives change over time. I did want to report back on the next slide, the feedback that we received at our last major public meeting. We had this workshop in February where we asked participants to, don't think the slide's coming up, Eric.
Yeah, I'm not
Might be a
sure
little
why
slow.
this is stuck here.
So while he's working on that, I'll just explain that we had a live surveying tool as well as paper surveys to help us understand some of the draft strategies that we had developed. We had strategies pertaining to pricing, either zone permit pricing or metered pricing. We had strategies pertaining to curb cuts, and we had strategies pertaining to how parking revenue could be used. What we found at that meeting was that there, as you can see from these results, there was generally speaking some widespread support for a number of these initiatives, particularly curb management plans for reducing curb cuts in the city. All of these strategies ended up in our draft report because of the support that we saw at these meetings. The graduated pricing and tiered pricing we'll explain a little bit later. But also using any additional parking revenue to fund bicycle, pedestrian, or transit infrastructure. The group of participants at the meeting, which there were more than 50 participants, including people from across the city, 68% of them said they were in favor of it. So that's just a very broad overview. Once again, every one of these meetings has a detailed meeting summary attached to it, which will be made available to you. So with that, I'll pass it off to Eric.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you can still see this. This is the recommended strategies. Actually, let me go back to that. For some reason it's not letting me do what I was doing before. Anyway, Michael and myself will co-present these strategies. The strategies are broad and they contain multiple actions, multiple short, medium, and long-term actions. So you get a sense of what they are. We've got 10 strategies. They're loosely ordered, starting with topics that we've discussed the most, but otherwise they're not in any particular order. We're going to describe in detail a few that were emphasized in our discussions with Jersey City. And the rest we'll go through quickly. It is a lot to cram into the time we have available, so that's why we're leaving time at the end for questions. Okay, so strategy number one. Well, first I should explain we're following this format that you see here for most of the strategies. So the top left gray box gives an explanation of what the strategy is. The other gray box on the top right lists the objectives of the strategy. And as I said, within each strategy, the city will be doing multiple actions, and some of these are listed on the bottom. The long-term actions, I should point out, are not necessarily the ultimate result of the strategy. And I will also emphasize that there is more detail in the report. Seeing as, the limited time we have for this presentation, we wanted to emphasize what we're showing here. So for this strategy, as noted before, we had found, when we went through the parking zones, we found complexities and inefficiencies, and that means that management, parking management will be an effective tool for something like this. So in terms of the idea, short term, by taking a step back, and we're talking about freezing the zones, so taking a step back to look at the zones comprehensively allows room to implement management. Mainly that's through adjustments in the boundaries to the zones and in pricing. And the ultimate goal with this strategy is efficiency. And I'll just explain, one of the long-term goals is graduated pricing. If you're not familiar, graduated pricing is when the cost of the permit increases with additional vehicles. So for example, the permit for a second or third car would cost more than the permit for the first car. This allows those who use less of the city's resources to pay less. And based on feedback from the public, we recommend a low price for the first 2 cars because many families have 2 incomes and would need 2 cars, for example. Moving on here, here are the actions that we recommend. Freezing the zones initially allows us to take a step back and collect data that we need to make an informed decision. A major part of the management would be balancing supply with demand, and we can't start that without sufficient data. Finally, here you'll also recognize this slide format as we go forward. We'll be following this for most of the strategies. So just to give you an explanation, this top bar lists what we're calling the measures of success. So these are things that you can measure. You know, they're tangible. They're things that you can identify to know if a strategy is working. Because as you may have noticed, many of the objectives for the strategies are intangible. I mean, for example, reducing parking demand. So measures of success are a way to kind of bring that down to earth and make that measurable. The middle bar here lists the challenges that we've identified to getting these started. In most cases that's missing data or missing technology. Sometimes there could be a change to the ordinances that would be required, so things like that. And then finally, the bottom bar gives us an explanation of how to overcome those barriers. And these are really the first steps in getting a strategy accomplished. So we're not going to have a lot of time to go into these, but they will be in the report. And I know that the council also has a copy of this presentation. So with that, we'll try to move it along, and Michael will be doing strategy number 2.
Sure. So expanding shared parking programs. This is something many of you are probably already familiar with because during the course of the study, there have been 2 pilot programs that are already active. The idea behind shared parking is it's an agreement where 2 or more complementary land uses share the same parking spaces. The common example that's used often is a bank and a bar. Although, you know, many people go to each of those locations by car, they won't necessarily go to those locations at the same time. So those different uses could share the same parking spaces, therefore effectively optimizing the amount of available spaces. The 2 pilot programs that are already active are at 2 schools, PS 24 and PS 28. So I think West Side and then in the Heights. Going on to the next slide, there is potential to expand not just at schools, but in other areas as well. We've heard reports that there's some parking availability in some of in the waterfront district, which wouldn't necessarily, at the schools, it's shared parking for residents to park there overnight, and they obviously would need to remove their cars by the time faculty and staff at that school would need to park there. Other locations throughout the city might offer opportunities where the shared parking could take place during the day. For instance, you know, if people wanted to go to businesses or go to restaurants during the day, they maybe have spaces available to them that currently they do not have access to. This idea, this shared parking initiative, is something that was very popular, and the results of the survey suggest this, as well as the results of the ward meetings that we coordinated. I do want to mention in the next slide, for this to be successful, there needs to be data available to show utilization rates and occupancy rates in these garages. This data currently is not very comprehensive. So working with developers, working with a variety of stakeholders to make this happen is really critical. So whereas schools, you know, you already have a point of contact, it would be really important going forward to work with developers, and perhaps you could make reductions in minimum parking requirements contingent on the businesses sharing the parking data and making those parking spaces available for shared use. Moving on to the next slide, coordinating on and off-street parking rates. So what do coordinated rates look like? On-street rates are priced to encourage high turnover, while off-street rates are more attractive for long-term parking. So currently in many places in Jersey City, it's the opposite. So on-street metered parking on like a Saturday afternoon would be about 75 cents an hour, whereas off-street in similar locations is $8 to $10 an hour. So this encourages people to not just park on street, but also park there for very long periods of time potentially. This was an issue that was raised many times over at public meetings. And to the extent possible, you know, we want to prevent people from circling the block or double parking or parking illegally just to avoid paying some of those higher rates. So coordinating on-street and off-street parking rates is really essential to preventing that sort of circling that we see happening in Jersey City. So on the next slide, we have a couple of ideas of where these programs could be launched. So the Newark Avenue Pedestrian Plaza, we had a lot of discussions with residents there at that ward meeting about on-street spaces being used by residents or used by visitors to the city, and not necessarily available to residents or people who just needed to drop in and grab a coffee real quick and go on their way. So that was one area we identified as a potential location to pilot what we're calling a tiered meter pricing. So this was something we also presented at the workshop and was viewed rather favorably by most participants. It would require updating the meter technology, but how it works is rates would progressively increase the longer the vehicle takes up the parking space. So just a pure example, like if the first hour the vehicle would pay, the driver would pay $1 to park for that hour. The second hour, rather than it being another dollar, it would go up to $2 or $3. So it progressively increases from there and really encourages people to make those quick shopping trips. And if they need longer term parking solutions, then they find an off-street garage to do that in. So next slide. And the goal of all of this, and what I'd like to emphasize, is that if we're successful, on-street parking will have an occupancy of 85%. So there would always be a space available for someone who really needed it. And it would encourage higher turnover than what we're seeing in a lot of the commercial areas. So that's really kind of the goal that we're heading on this one. All right. Next, let's talk a little bit about enforcement. I mentioned this earlier as a real challenge that was brought up. And again, we didn't get a consistent message on enforcement. It definitely differed in different parts of the city, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. I want to focus on really communication, and this could be, signage, painted curb spaces. There is a lot of confusion throughout the city, and residents across the city are really having a hard time deciphering some of the rules pertaining to enforcement. So really finding solutions to improve that communication, I think, is prioritized. On the next slide, there are a number of technological solutions that can help make enforcement a little bit more efficient throughout the city. I really still want to focus on improving signage and striping first to help prevent some of the confusion and then the violations that that happen currently. Part of this, in working to simplify the message, is really key to all of this. So if you go to the next slide, what we're suggesting first off is, when the time comes that we're available to have in-person meetings, we really recommend those in-person meetings having parking enforcement presence at a handful of them at least, where they can communicate their goals and help understand some of the community's problems with enforcement as it is today. And opening that communication, I could really benefit in helping understand some of these policies and what they're trying to accomplish with their enforcement policies. So that's kind of the first step. Ultimately, yes, looking into some other solutions to improve the efficiency of enforcement and making it a little bit more equal throughout the city is something certainly that can be looked into, and that's a little bit longer term. But in the near term, working to improve the communication and clarifying the role of enforcement in the city would be beneficial.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I'll be talking about the next few strategies. So number 5, just go through quickly, is to manage on-street curb space. A lot happens at the curb, as we know. The feedback we got from the public, we heard about lane blockages from loading and from shared mobility, such as Uber and Lyft and drop-offs and that sort of thing. What this strategy does is take a comprehensive look at the curb as a public resource. The idea really is to remove obstructions to traffic flow, of course, through the process of designating space or by shifting times for deliveries. This is pretty easy to pilot in the short term and could be done on almost any commercial corridor. The long-term goal would be a citywide curb management program. I should say we've developed performance measures and barriers and next steps for this strategy. Of course, those are found in the final report. So in the interest of time, moving on to strategy number 6. Commuters and visitors, these are a common problem in any city. How to manage that. Jersey City really has an additional burden that not all cities have, is the commuters who park to take transit. You have very good transit resources here. This strategy would really designate areas for visitors and commuters. That's what we mean by intercept parking. And the ultimate goal is to eliminate the competition between residents and visitors for parking. You shouldn't have to be competing for it. A key component of this is wayfinding and consistent signage, and doing that wayfinding signage provides the clarity that's needed so that this kind of thing can work. Is if you have intercept parking, and even if you have a lot of it, if visitors and commuters don't know how to get to it, it's not working. So the short-term need to get this one started is for data, really. I'll show that here. We advise for this focusing around transit stations where we know commuters want to park. And again, as I said, that would be the starting point for gathering more data and getting this to work. Excuse me a minute. So we have developed performance measures for this. I would just point out that I think I pretty much explained what needs to be done. In addition, in terms of data, really it's collecting information on commuter parking location and the extent of it, and identifying underutilized resources within those areas, especially near transit stations. I guess I'm passing it back to Michael for the next few. Thank you.
Yeah, so this building on some of kind of communication of city policies, this came up over and over again. As I mentioned, it was a major challenge with pertaining to enforcement. However, just more broadly, communicating the city's sustainability goals. And to the extent possible, there was a lot of confusion about the permit parking zones and hours of operation and things like that. So working to educate the community on these, and to the extent possible, simplifying some of those, because it's inherently difficult to communicate complex policies. And these were very, very complex. So again, like holding community meetings is great when the time can return to when we hold community meetings. However, there can be marketing materials, fact sheets, mailings that can help clarify some of the policies here. And it's not just about city residents, it could also be about visitors. We had a great idea come from the Ward E meeting where residents noted that they had gone to other areas in New Jersey where the town website or the city website had noted where visitors should park when they get there. Residents expressed that similar website or webpage doesn't exist for Jersey City, and they would hope, particularly in Ward E, where a lot of people go to the Newark pedestrian plaza who are from out of town, that they could have some clarity on where they park rather than parking on spaces that could otherwise be used for residents. On the next slide, I'll briefly discuss re-examining the city's curb cut policy. The graphic here that you're seeing, it displays just one example, Armstrong Avenue between Sterling Avenue and Kennedy Boulevard, where just the total number of spaces is greatly reduced by the amount of curb cuts. So of course you need to remove on-street parking spaces where there's a fire hydrant, and that gets you down to about 88 available spaces on that block. You see great reductions when you start considering the curb cuts and the space, the buffer areas between curb cuts where cars can't park because the curb cuts are too close together. So you go from 88 available spaces to 29 spaces on just one block. So it's more than halved. This is a real concern among residents. It's something that we heard at all of the meetings. But however, it is a really difficult problem to address. That said, the first step that can be taken is to freeze all requests for new curb cuts while the permitting process is evaluated.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'm going to go into some depth on slide number 9, or excuse me, strategy number 9. We have a few more slides on this one. We had a lot of conversations with Barca about this because this strategy is very specific to the context of Jersey City, because there are really no blanket parking requirements, if you will. And there's a lot going on in the strategy, so hopefully I can explain it. The trend nationwide really is cities are moving away from parking minimums and moving towards maximums. But not only that, but also to use-based requirements. Maximums mean developers are required to provide parking up to a maximum number of spaces. And I should point out that it's very important to note that maximums won't work without the support from other parking management strategies. This sort of thing can't be done in a vacuum, in other words. The long-term goal here would be to increase maximums, excuse me. But before the city can get to that, this strategy would advise to simplify the districts and really break this up into steps so that the city can move forward incrementally. So let me explain what I mean here. Going to the next slide. So currently, we observe some what we would call inefficiencies in the zoning code. Currently, there's 97 individual redevelopment districts, varying in character, neighborhood context, and also in size from a single lot to an entire district. Currently, these districts are independent from the main zoning structure. In other words, they're not categorized under commercial or residential. They are independent. And as you can see in the table at the bottom here, these requirements, the requirements for each of these vary across the board. So some have minimums, some have maximums, some have both. That accounts for mostly all of them. And then there are a small percentage that have neither. And the legend on the map may be hard to read, but we'll be providing you with this PowerPoint as a follow-up. But these colors here, these 4 colors here on the map, they match up to the 4 categories in this table here. The other thing I'd point out is that it's been an ad hoc approach in terms of how requirements are developed. Either they've been done without analysis or really just based on what's been done before. So moving on, as with the other strategies, we advise to focus on area near transit stations first. You can see these green circles here. Other areas in the pink squares would be candidates for payment in lieu. And that just means that in lieu of building parking, the developer would pay fees into a fund, which could be used for community parking or other transportation improvements. Okay, so getting back a little bit to why are cities moving away from parking minimums? Because one of the reasons is because they add costs to new development. As the parking ratio increases, construction costs increase too, as you can see here in this graphic. Another reason is they add mass to new developments. So not only that, I would say, but with applying parking management techniques that's been done in some cities, and also the changes in mobility that we're seeing with car sharing and potentially AVs coming out, some cities have found that they've built too much parking. And that often, we understand, often that sounds hard to believe beforehand, which is why it happens. So this kind of hopefully makes sense. So what we're advocating here is a modern approach using the latest techniques to right-size these parking requirements for Jersey City. We're not prescribing something that's universal. This would be based on Jersey City's context. Really, the approach is to standardize the principles, not standardize the ratio. So we're not going to recommend any kind of standard universal ratio, parking ratio for all developments. So what do I mean by standardize the principles? Really, this comes down to certain key things: unbundling parking costs from the primary use costs, making sure that especially the requirements aren't based on the demands by floor area, which is sort of the traditional way to do it, but by the demand for access by activity. So what is really happening in these buildings or developments? And if you're familiar with the ITE parking generation manual, that's not what we're talking about here. That particular manual, some people have heard of it. It's really, in our opinion, poorly suited to medium and high density contexts such as Jersey City. So, and again, as I mentioned about the 97 redevelopment areas, we'd also like to apply some uniformity so that it's easy to apply and to enforce. So for example, currently Jersey City requires only a traffic impact analysis for approval. So we would advise that developers provide parking impact analysis and an access plan. And I know this is a lot of information. This is all detailed in the report. And so to wrap up number 9, this really is one of the most complex strategies, and it does have high barriers, you know, due to the fact that it would require some changes to the zoning code, and I'm sure would need to get council approval for much of this. But we have developed performance measures and barriers and next steps to get this done, as we show here. Not sure how I'm doing on time, but in the interest of time, we're going to keep moving. We're almost done here. Strategy number 10, won't spend much time on, but just to point out, transportation demand management. If you haven't heard of it, these strategies, or TDM strategies as they're called, are illustrated here. I think the major point we'd want to make is that we've heard this at every level. Improving transit was actually the 3rd most popular strategy in the online survey out of 7, and it was approved by almost half of the residents. These sorts of things are a great way to reduce the challenges we're facing, and they really complement much of the parking management strategies that we're recommending. And of course, the city's already taking steps in this direction, as Michael mentioned, through VIA. And our performance measures and so forth will be in the report. Okay, so one thing, that's it for the strategies. One thing we did want to pause here and note is why don't you see new parking garages mentioned as one of the strategies? So I want to emphasize up front, we are not saying not to build a garage. We want to clarify that we're advising grabbing the low-hanging fruit first. So adding supply, like which, you know, building a garage is a good example of, sounds like a solution, an easy solution, but it's not always that simple. So one thing we see time after time, and you know, city after city, really the first impulse is to build a garage. But we just want to emphasize that there are techniques and technologies for parking management that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago even. And even things such simple things such as organizing and taking stock and gathering data on what's available can illuminate ways to gain efficiency. So our basic message is really we want to try and squeeze out more efficiency before trying other things like a garage. So before just jumping to a garage, let's see what you could get out of management, and maybe more than you think. And with that, we will conclude the presentation. I think the overall conclusions we took from this is that we didn't get all the data that we had hoped to get, but we did get an understanding of what data the city does need to collect, and we're providing recommendations on targeted recommendations on what those would be and which types support different strategies in order to prioritize. We do want to emphasize that the immediate steps of to improve management and pave the way for long-term solutions, these are detailed in the report. And as I said, the next steps are really to finalize the report, and we're getting close to closing out the study. So with this, looks like the presentation is gone, but that's okay. We're really at the time for questions now. So we have the whole consultant team available. But
thank you, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just wrap up. Do we still have everyone? I know we went over time by about 20 minutes, but it's just a lot of information to cover. So thank you all for sticking with us. Council President, we can move right into Q&A. The only thing that I'll add is that this report is really a blueprint for how to deal with parking management for the city. So it's not a plan that's being added to our master plan or that requires formal action from the planning board or from the council at this point. So just want to mention that before we go into the Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Barker. Council, do any of you guys have any questions?
Hi, Barker.
Okay.
It's Rolando,
Hi,
Council Laval. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Team. Great. So what's the if it's not being approved by the council or the planning board, what's the impact of this report ultimately, like in real terms, like how is it effectuated throughout the city, or is it effectuated throughout the city, or is it largely just a recommendation in that sense?
Sure. So yes, this is mostly a plan to offer recommendations and strategies for how the city could deal with its parking issues. So I should mention, and we didn't touch on this earlier in the presentation, but there was a technical advisory committee that had been guiding the process of developing this plan since the beginning. And that included all of the city agencies that have anything and everything to do with parking, including the Parking Enforcement Division, the Traffic Division, HEDC, etc. So while this is mostly a report to deliver recommendations to the city, I did want it to focus a little bit on what actions we can put into effect sort of immediately after the plan. And like Eric mentioned, capitalize on some of the low-hanging fruit. So this is really to deliver to the city agencies and to the council a blueprint for how the city can move to implement some of these actions. It's certainly not anything legally binding or a directive or anything like that, and it should function as a comprehensive document that touches on a lot of things and sort of exposes a lot of other questions that the city still needs to answer. So on that point, just to wrap up, I'm sure you picked up on the fact that as the team was going through a lot of these recommendations, they mentioned that more data is needed to do this or to do that. While we want the recommendations to be data-driven, they weren't able to collect all of the data that we thought we could at the beginning of the study, and what they've done instead is created spreadsheets and documents and files that pinpoint exactly the data we need to collect, what it should be used for, and how they're tied to various strategies moving forward. So it's really just a tool for the various city agencies to use.
Enough.
Okay. Someone else?
Yeah, I just want to say, you go down to Charlotte, North Carolina. You said you didn't recommend parking garages. Well, they have numerous parking garages, and the people are quite happy. And they have, I think that's one of the points. When Michael Young and I were at the meeting at number 7 school, this was something that him and I thought was really wrong. You're not considering parking garages.
Yes, we'd be happy to respond to that, Councilman. So the idea is the first step is to optimize what we do have and make sure we're taking advantage of all of the supply we currently have already built, and then to think about building parking garages as the second step. And so I want to invite Rachel Weinberger, who's our parking policy expert on the team, to respond specifically to that question. Rachel?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us, and sorry for the late hour. The question of parking in garages is really a complicated one, and I'm going to just sort of preface my response by saying one of the things that we saw through the public outreach is there was a lot of consistency in the recognition of the symptoms, and there was a lot of disagreement about what the possible solutions might be. And part of the reason for the disagreement on solutions when the symptoms were really identified similarly is a question of what was the underlying understanding of the issues. So in the context of, I just work in Charlotte, it's interesting that you raised it in the, I guess it's called the North End, it might be the South End, I think it's the North End. And they also were looking to be most efficient in the use of their parking garages. There's a lot of residents of Jersey City who don't own cars, and that might be considered a good thing, right? The question of the distribution of car ownership sometimes is related to a lack of resources. Typically, families who don't own cars across the United States don't have the wealth to own cars, but that's not the case in Jersey City. Many people are attracted to Jersey City because of the other transportation amenities that are offered, right? So we need to look at what the opportunities really are to capitalize on the advantages that Jersey City presents prior to looking to increasing supply in parking. So typically, and we don't know this specifically, but there are between 4 and 9 parking spaces per vehicle across the US, and that's a lot of empty spaces at any given time. The parking problem really is that when there is not an empty space at the time and in the exact location where you're looking for it. So before building new garages, it really does seem critical to look at what the other issues are. I'll give you an example in Massachusetts where there was a lot of enthusiasm for building a new garage, and then the consultants, and I was not part of that consulting team, pointed out that there actually was a reasonable amount of available parking quite nearby, but that there was a very dangerous intersection and it was difficult for people to get from where the parking was to where they ultimately wanted to be. I seem to have been dropped out of.
Okay.
Sorry, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Yes, you're back.
Okay, sorry, I was dropped and I don't know where you lost me, but the parking solution in that particular case, it turned out was street design improvements, and that turned out to be a very important first step and put off the construction of a multi-million-dollar garage structure and allowed those funds to be used for other things.
More questions? Any more questioning, guys?
I have one. This is Councilman Robinson.
Okay.
About the shared space. You said something about like restaurants and I guess banks sharing the space. How realistic is that if to get banks and everyone else to buy in, and how have you seen that happen, and I guess the other studies that you've been doing?
Yeah, so that's a typical example, and there's different ways that can occur, and I'll give you what I think is the most beautiful recent example of how that works is in the city of Sacramento. They built a 35,000 seat stadium a couple of years ago, and they did not include one new additional parking space for the stadium. Instead, what they did is they identified within a certain radius of the stadium all of the private parking garages, including the ones that were, in buildings and office buildings, not just commercial garages. And then they set up a person whose job was to negotiate with the building management and all of those. And then they used all of that, which was available parking, because again, their ball game or concert is going to be in the nighttime, and that office parking is used primarily in the daytime. So your point is well made. A lot of building managers will say, well, we have a liability concern or a security concern. There's parking in the ground floors or below grade in their building, but when the city intervenes and brokers that, there are lots of examples where that can be managed. More obvious examples could be in a strip mall situation, right? For example, where it's open, where it's not actually inside of the building. But again, in that situation, you would have a certain number of spaces that are required for that bank. That was the example that Michael used. A certain number that are required for that bar. And those requirements are usually developed without thinking about what the neighboring land use is. I mean, it happens automatically in a commercial garage situation, right? Everybody gets to use that garage. And so that's another policy strategy that some cities have employed, which we haven't mentioned here, is rather than have developers create the parking spaces on their development site, they would pay a fee to the city, and then the city would build collective parking.
Rachel, I just want you to touch on one more thing. So council members, one thing we noticed as we were developing the study is the 2 pilots at the schools that have been mentioned where the school lots were opened up for residents to use parking overnight. It was brought to our attention that those weren't being used as much as we thought that they would be. And Rachel made an interesting point about the type of user that would be drawn to using that. And so as we look to expand that pilot maybe to all schools in Jersey City, where we're able to use that excess capacity, there are a few things that the city needs to keep in mind, and these are discussed in the report, and I want Rachel to talk about them now.
Sure. So one of the things that happens when you're sharing school parking is typically you have to be out by 6 or 7 a.m. So the person who leaves for work at 6 or 7 a.m. is coming home at 3 or 4, right? So when you're coming home at 3 or 4, that's when there's still a space available on street in your neighborhood. So the person who's having difficulty parking is the person who's coming home later, 7, 8 p.m., where there's no parking. And the available parking then in the school lot isn't useful for them because they don't need to leave until 8 a.m., for example, right? So when you want to set something up like that to see it be successful, you might want to do a pre-reservation system or an actual agreement so that you have the people who are arriving home earlier are the ones parking in that space, leaving those spaces available for the people who don't need to leave so early the next morning. Was that the point, Barca?
Yes, exactly. So that's just something for us to keep in mind. We'll keep, as we're doing these pilots, especially now in the current environment, as we're opening up lots, a lot of it is just monitoring and seeing how much use they really are getting. And if they're not being used as much as we thought, even though we're hearing from residents that they, there's a lack of parking and they'd like to use the lots, there has to be a reason for that. So this could be a reason. There could be other reasons. And the point is just to monitor that to make sure that if we're opening up lots for shared parking, that we maximize the impact of those and make sure that as many people can use them as possible and keep these things in mind. So yes, thank you.
So I want to just add to that, though, if you try something and it doesn't work, I think it's very important, and that's a very good illustration of it, and I'll give you another one, is to really think about why it didn't work, because everything suggests that it ought to work, and then there's some funny thing like that going on. In another project that I've been doing for USDOT, my team and I have been using GPS traces to show how people are driving around, circling around, looking for parking. And we were able to combine that with some parking occupancy data that we had in the San Francisco case, and that we saw that in the cases where we had overlapping data, that the average occupancy on blocks where people were cruising for parking was only 50%, which means that they essentially were bypassing available parking spots looking for a free space. So in that case, their need was perhaps for longer term parking, or perhaps they just were really looking for free parking rather than for parking. And so, you really kind of need to go down into the nitty gritty details on some of these questions.
I saw about, different means of transportation. What's the relation to bikes and having bike lanes and things like that to parking, if any?
So if you mean what's the direct mathematical relationship, that doesn't exist. I know there's a direct hostility relationship because typically when bike lanes get put in, you have to lose 1 or 2 parking spaces, and people get very emotional about that. But the reality on the flip of that is the more people you have accessing your area by bicycle, the fewer are coming by car. And so the need for parking actually should diminish by quite a lot. I mean, one of the things that we seldom think about is there's not really a demand for parking just by itself. There's just a demand for access to particular places. And to the extent that you can only go to that place by driving, that's what determines all of the demand for parking. So to the extent you can get people walking, coming by transit, or biking, or carpooling, that will always decrease your needs for actual parking spaces. So while it seems hard to make that leap, right? If I'm a driver and I need to park and you see you're taking parking, I'm actually thinking in my rearview mirror, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're losing parking, but I'm not also thinking, oh, but we're losing drivers. Right, we're losing people driving as well. So that's what the travel demand management strategies are about. It's a very difficult transition for people to make.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add to that is, especially in a city like ours, we don't have the luxury that New York City has of very wide streets where space can be allocated for bike lanes and for parking and for travel lanes. And a lot of times it is very realistically a trade-off. And so where we can, we're trying to make the focus on how many people total we can move from point A to point B as opposed to how many vehicles, because there are more, obviously transit will always be a more efficient way of moving as many people as possible than a single user vehicle will be. And so it's just managing all of the different modes all together and identifying locations where certain treatments are better fitted than others. And this plan does go into it a little bit and uses those principles as the foundation. But I think the other plans that have been developed, the pedestrian study, our work with VIA and monitoring where people are using a lot of transit, and even going back to comments we got in Ward A and in other places where seniors were saying that they would be willing to give up their vehicles if they had much, much better transit options, is encouraging to know that we can start to move towards better transit improvements.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Sean?
Are we done?
Yeah.
Can I just ask one question? I promised one person I'd ask a question, and I promise that'll be it. Sorry. So there's just a question that came from the public that asked if the study basically said what percentage of public space street parking ended up taking up. Like what percentage of the public land area is given to street parking? Did you guys look at that?
We didn't specifically in the context of this study, but you could do a back of the envelope because we know. I mean, we did show what the on-street parking is. I'll say that sort of generally, cities devote 30 to 40% of their surface area to automobile uses.
Great, thank you. I'll save my other questions for just internally. Thank you.
I have, Council President.
Could you reach out to Barker, because I know we have to move on to other guys. If one more question, Rolando, that's just about it, because we have to move on from here. They want to move on.
It's a request, actually, so I'm going to phrase it as a question. If I can get for the email, the e-surveys, demographic breakdowns and geographic breakdowns you did with the listening sessions, and then on the curb cuts, you talked about the spaces lost, and let me be clear, I'm not pushing for curb cuts here. I'm just curious in terms of what the number of spaces, or some of those curb cuts are driveways, and how many cars are accommodated as a result. You have that one example. I'd be interested to know just kind of what that number ends up looking like if you've done that kind of work. So. Appreciate it.
Sure, I'll follow up with you and the entire council on that via email.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, Sean?
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay. So with that being said, may I have a motion to adjourn at 7:09 PM?
There's no speakers, Sean?
Motion.
This is the caucus, Rich.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, what am I thinking of? I'm confused.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
Motion made by Councilperson Rivera. May I have a second?
Second.
Back from-
Second by Councilperson Cranzeri. All in favor of the motion to adjourn at 7:09 PM by acclamation, please say aye. Councilmember?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, we are out of here at 7:09 PM. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Good night.
Good
Thank you,
night.
everyone. See ya.
Thank you.
Remember,
Uncle Papa.
residents, adhere
Bye.
to those safety precautions. Wear those gloves and masks while you're out and about.
Uncle
Yeah.
Papa, take your vitamin D.
There you go.
Okay, thanks,
Take
Sean.
care.